A sweet, unfamiliar aroma roused Yuan from sleep. His dreams had been filled with gunfire, smoke, and the echo of duels, phantoms of the Thunderlands still haunting him. Even now, his bullet core pulsed with restless energy, hungry for battle. His metal-threaded veins ached for chi, yet the spirit train's stale air felt barren compared to the Thunderland's chi-rich storms. He felt like a man who had leapt from a roaring river into a dry creek. Not that cycling will help me break through to the third coil, he thought as sunlight filtered through the panoramic windows. That threshold isn't one I can cross alone. Advancing to the third coil demanded a rare spirit fruit pill, a potent dose of chi in solid form. It forged cores and scraps, but for cultivators, the risk was lethal unless their bodies had been hardened through countless cycles. The true challenge wasn't cultivation. It was finding a pill untouched by corruption. Radiation, demonic residue, even minor taints could turn a dose into a death sentence. Worse, the black market was overrun with fakes. Only the great sects possessed true, clean pills, and never gave them away freely. Alternatives? Slaying a spirit beast beyond the third coil and absorbing its core. Rarer still. Riskier too. Do I even need a pill? Yuan mused. Gunsouls don't follow the same rules. Before he could spiral further into theory, his attention turned to the world outside. Through the window, a sea of calcified white flowers stretched across a milky lake, blooming from the bones of rusted lost age ruins. Remnants of the Fleshmancer's early attempts to seed life in the wasteland. Their spores tainted water, cured only by intense heat. We'll need to be cautious about supplies, Yuan thought, rising from the sofa. At least breakfast smells. He froze. Holster was gone. And she never cooked. His senses flared. He felt it again, the faint feminine presence he'd first noticed yesterday. Subtle, yet growing stronger. No hostility. But he wasn't about to gamble. Holster! He called, voice sharp, stepping into the dining cabin. She sat at the table, eating calmly. Beside her, a stranger. Yuan moved instantly, fists clenched, every muscle ready to strike, until he realized the woman sat inches from Holster. Too close. If she was a threat, an attack might hit them both. The stranger turned, smiling warmly. Greetings, honored Master Yuan, she said with an elegant bow, her tone lyrical and unfamiliar. I hope you rested well. Well enough to take your head off if you don't move away from my protege, Yuan snapped, coiled to strike. I don't know how you snuck aboard, but you picked the wrong train. Her brow furrowed, confused. Snuck in? I've been here from the start. Holster looked up, blinking in surprise, as if he was the one being strange. Yuan hesitated. He studied the woman more closely. Slim frame, auburn hair in a bun, pale golden eyes, and a red and black uniform stitched with words he didn't recognize. She looked eerily like Holster. An older sister? A mother? And clean. Too clean. Not a speck of grime, not a hair out of place. No one, not even cultivator nobles, boarded a spirit train without dirt or dust. She was no ordinary woman. Then it clicked. Her chi, familiar yet strange, threaded through the train itself. You're the rad hag? Yuan asked, stunned. Not anymore, she replied, almost offended. At least, not entirely. Can't you sense it? My aura. And then, realization dawned. You are the spirit train? The woman inclined her head. You could say that. I'm its caretaker spirit. That's impossible. Only the Thunderlands generate enough chi to birth a caretaker. And yet here I am. She gestured to the seat across from her. I have a theory. We can discuss it over breakfast. Tea. She held up a dark liquid in a glass bottle. Yuan eyed it with suspicion. It did smell like jasmine. I didn't find any tea on board. You found leaves, honored master, she said. They had rotted. I restored them using my body's repair protocols. Holster devoured her meal eagerly. Yuan hesitated, then grabbed a silver fork and took a bite of bacon, whatever that was. It was divine. He devoured the rest in seconds, unable to stop. More. The caretaker offered. Some bolts with the meat? Bolts. A plate of actual bolts clanked onto the table. I don't eat those, Yuan said. Oh. She quickly disposed of them through a trapdoor in the wall. I assumed, with your metal veins. It's fine, he muttered. The rest is good. I wanted to thank you and Miss Holster for repairing me. I slumbered underground for a long time. Yuan raised an eyebrow. You mentioned a theory? She nodded at the empty seat near them. The rad hag tried to possess me as she died. She failed, but the attempt infused me with enough of her spirit for me to awaken. This body is modeled after memories of my former crew. I hoped it would comfort you. Yuan didn't fully understand spirits, but she seemed sane. Protective. He had felt the Radhag's power. If the caretaker had inherited even a sliver of that, she could defend them. But one thing still bothered him. Why do you look like Holster? I can change forms, she said, blinking a little too quickly, as if realizing it was expected. I assumed this would make you more comfortable. Was I mistaken? Yuan shrugged. Looks don't matter. Holster trusts you. That's enough. Holster beamed. The spirit bowed her head. Thank you. I will do everything I can to keep her safe. What do I call you? Yuan asked. Spirits value names. My name is written on my side, she said. Orient Junction TR61. You may call me Orient. Orient? Not exactly majestic. He expected something like Steel Empress or Iron Phoenix. But he said nothing. I'm no master, he corrected. Just Yuan. As you wish, honored passenger Yuan, she replied, clearly amused. We will arrive at Flesh Market within the hour. Yuan stiffened. Flesh Market. A slaver's haven under the Enyong Khan's control. He could investigate Slash's gang there. Maybe even find a clean pill. But Holster would be in danger the moment she stepped off. Can you keep her safe while I'm away? Yuan asked, patting Holster's head. People will target her the second she's seen. Orient's eyes narrowed slightly. Unwelcome guests will not find Miss Holster on board. Nor will they leave if they do. Yuan blinked. She spoke with conviction. I'll test that, he said. A spar once I'm back. See how strong you really are. Of course, Orient said. And when your business is done, I will take you anywhere you wish. That is my purpose. Yuan paused, surprised. A loyal, mobile domain in the wasteland? A rare gift. Sects would pay handsomely for secure transport, he muttered, already planning. Maybe I can fund a pill after all. And just like that, their journey gained new momentum, steel wheels rolling toward danger, but also opportunity. Yuan stirred to the scent of something warm and unfamiliar. His dreams had been war-torn, a haze of gunfire, smoke and relentless duels, echoes of the Thunderlands still embedded deep in his core. Even now, his bullet heart thumped with an anxious rhythm, itching for battle. The chi in the spirit train's air felt thin and dry compared to the rich electric storms they'd left behind. Like stepping out of a river into a shallow pond. Cycling won't push me to the third coil, Yuan thought as sunlight broke through the wide-paneled windows. That path needs more than effort, it needs help. Breaking into the third coil wasn't simple. It demanded a spirit fruit pill, chi crystallized into potent medicine. Scraps could form their first cores with it, but cultivators needed hardened bodies or risked shattering from the inside out. The real issue wasn't cultivating. It was trust in the pill's purity. Even a trace of radiation or demonic taint could turn a miracle into a death sentence. The wasteland was riddled with fakes. The real pills came only from powerful sects, and they didn't give anything away freely. There was another way. Hunt down a spirit beast stronger than a third coil and absorb its core. Rarer. Deadlier. Maybe gun souls don't need either, Yuan wondered. We've always bent the rules. His eyes drifted to the landscape beyond the window. A frozen sea of white flowers, petrified and stretching to the horizon, choked the milky lakes and rusted ruins of the lost age. Remnants of the Fleshmancer's early experiments, flora designed to thrive in decay. Their spores ruined water unless burned out by fire. We'll need to be careful when restocking, he thought. Then paused. And that smell. Yuan's body went still. Holster was gone. And she never cooked. He sat up fast. That strange feminine presence he'd noticed yesterday, it was stronger now. Still no hostility. But familiarity could be a mask. Holster. Yuan called, stepping into the dining cabin. She was there, seated and eating. Calm. And beside her sat a stranger. In an instant, Yuan's body coiled like a spring. Fists clenched. Muscles ready. But the woman was seated too close to Holster, too close for a clean strike. The stranger turned and offered a warm, respectful smile. Greetings, honored Master Yuan, she said, bowing slightly. Her voice carried a foreign lilt, melodic and unfamiliar. I hope you slept well. Well enough to split your skull if you don't move away from my protege, Yuan warned, eyes narrow. I don't know how you got aboard, but you've made a mistake. Her brows lifted in confusion. Snuck in? Honored Master, I've been here the whole time. Holster glanced up at him with wide, confused eyes.
Yuan froze.
The woman had a slender build, auburn hair tied in a neat bun, pale golden eyes, and wore a formal red uniform trimmed in black. Strange symbols marked her cap, none he recognized. She looked familiar. Like Holster's elder sister.
Or her mother. Too clean.
No dirt, no sweat, no scent of travel. In a place like this, that alone was unnatural. And then Yuan felt it, chi subtle and layered. Interwoven with the train itself. You're the rad hag? He asked, stunned. Not anymore, she replied with a slight frown. At least, not entirely.
Can't you feel it? My aura. And then it hit him.
You're the spirit train.
She nodded.
I am its caretaker spirit. Yuan stepped back, disbelief warring with reason.
That's impossible.
Only the Thunderlands create enough chi for a caretaker spirit to manifest. And yet, here I am. She gestured at the empty seat across from her. I have a theory. But first, breakfast?
Tea.
She raised a glass bottle filled with a dark liquid. Jasmine scented. I didn't find any tea on board.
You found old leaves, she said.
I restored them using my internal repair protocols. Holster kept eating without hesitation.
Yuan hesitated, then sat.
He picked up a fork, studied the unfamiliar food, and took a cautious bite.
And then another. And then all of it.
He had never tasted anything so soft and rich in flavor.
More, she offered.
Perhaps some bolts to go with it?
Bolts.
A plate of actual metal bolts clattered onto the table. I don't eat those, Yuan said.
Oh.
Her smile faded briefly. I assumed, with your metal veins.
It's fine, Yuan muttered.
The rest was excellent. I wanted to thank you and Miss Holster personally, the spirit said, removing the bolts through a trapdoor. You repaired me when I was little more than a shell. I've slept beneath the earth for a long, long time. Yuan studied her carefully. You mentioned a theory.
She nodded.
When the Radhag died, she tried to possess my frame in a final act of desperation. She failed, but her soul sparked something.
Enough for me to coalesce.
This body comes from memories of my last crew. I hoped it would feel familiar.
It made sense.
Spirits were born of moments. Ritual, death, desire. Perhaps that last act of violence had been enough. But one question lingered. Why do you look like Holster? I can take any form you wish, she replied, blinking too deliberately. I assumed a familiar face might make you both feel safer. Was that a mistake?
Yuan shrugged. Looks don't matter.
Holster trusts you.
That's enough.
Holster smiled, satisfied. The spirit bowed her head gratefully. Then I will protect her with everything I have. What should I call you?
Yuan asked.
My name is written on my hull, she said proudly. Orient Junction TR-61. You may call me Orient. Orient. Not exactly imposing. He'd expected something like Steel Phoenix or Heavenly Chariot. But he said nothing. I'm not a master, Yuan added. Just call me Yuan. As you wish, honored passenger Yuan, she replied playfully. We'll arrive at Flesh Market within the hour.
Yuan tensed. Flesh Market.
A den of slavers under the Inyong Khan's rule. If Slash's gang passed through there, he could find leads. Maybe even a clean pill. But Holster couldn't leave the train.
Not there.
Can you keep her safe while I'm gone? He asked. The moment someone sees her.
She will not be seen, Orient interrupted.
Her tone sharpened, her golden eyes flashing. No one unwelcome leaves my wagons. No one finds what I choose to hide. Yuan blinked, taken aback. I'll hold you to that, he said. We'll spar later. I want to see what you can do. I'd be honored, she replied. And after that, I'll carry you anywhere you need to go. That is my purpose. Yuan stared at her.
A mobile fortress.
A grateful guardian. A spirit with a debt. Sects would kill for this. Maybe I really can afford a pill, he thought. Steel wheels hummed beneath them, carrying Yuan not just across the wasteland, but toward the future he thought was out of reach.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
It didn't take Yuan long to find the Eastern Express local office. The small wooden warehouse stood near the artificial lake's waterfront, nestled between a bar and a whorehouse. Yuan knew that because 3 prostitutes had tried to petition him on his way there while a child beggar attempted to pickpocket him. He told off the former and slapped the latter off his back. Nobody dared to mug him though, which he took as a good sign. His eyes lingered on the badly painted sign above the door. Under better circumstances, he would have crossed the threshold at Mingxia's back and let her handle the negotiations. Instead, he walked inside alone, his fists clenched and his mind set on revenge. Someone here had betrayed his team to Slash and would pay the appropriate price. Yuan cautiously walked into the office, finding it to be a well-lit lounge similar to the trading post he encountered back in Gatesville. The windows were closed, the curtains dimming the sunlight outside. The carpeted floor led to a small stairway and a counter behind which stood walls filled with heavy ledgers. The smell of smoke hung over dirty plush chairs meant for visitors. The place was quiet, and worst of all empty. That immediately put Yuan on edge. No caravan post was ever devoid of people, even when closed, and he had seen no sign of it outside. Someone should be here, whether it was a disgruntled courier waiting for the receptionist to give him his package or a guard keeping watch over the facility. Yuan immediately looked around with all of his senses. He didn't detect any abnormal qi in the area, so it couldn't be an illusion or a barrier. The smell of smoke indicated that someone had been here not too long ago. He didn't detect any secret hole that would allow a sniper to strike him either.
Is someone here?
Yuan called out and received no answer. Now truly on guard, he cautiously took a step forward with his fists raised for battle. He wasn't one to back down from a fight, but his gut told him something terrible had happened here.
Anyone?
Once he had taken a few steps forward and confirmed that he was indeed alone, Yuan cautiously peeked over the counter. No hidden enemies arose to ambush him. He instead found out the likely source of the smoke smell. 3 neatly separated piles of ashes. A chill traveled down Yuan's spine as he checked the plush chairs. Small mounds of dust sat on the leather, the remains of unlucky workers or couriers caught in the crossfire of a terrible tragedy. Yuan counted dozens of them spread around the hall, and he expected to find more upstairs. Someone had killed everyone inside the building so cleanly that nobody outside its walls noticed. Who would have dared? The Eastern Express benefited from the protection of many local sections. It could have been a first strike in the brewing local war, but Yuan would have expected more damage if that were the case. Elders liked spectacular attacks because they sent a message. It must have been an outsider. Yuan couldn't fathom the reason behind the attack. What benefit would there be for secretly wiping out a neutral scrap-run trading post?
Information?
Yuan checked the ledgers, but found them entirely undisturbed. If anyone had stolen or destroyed any specific records, he couldn't tell which. And these ash piles, the closer Yuan looked at them, the more they bothered him. His qi sense detected faint, familiar green particles mixed with the remains of the dead. The same kind that had been polluting the Radhag's Thunderlands. Radioactive dust. I've been waiting for you, courier. Yuan's head snapped back right in time to see the door close behind him on its own. A man sat in the corner of the room in a lotus position, his glowing green eyes glaring at Yuan from the shadows with frightening intensity. An ancient, tattered scroll lay at his feet. A shiver ran down Yuan's spine as a sensation of all-consuming, overwhelming menace fell upon him. The figure, a tall, lean man with chiseled muscle and skin paler than chalk, radiated an aura of unyielding power. He wore nothing except for a tattered yellow-green loincloth of torn rubber and a mask made from the upper part of a human skull, leaving his wrinkled jaw and glowing emerald eyes exposed. A small Dharmachakra wheel of rusted steel floated on its own behind his head like a halo. White tumors covered his shoulders in a thick armor of cysts and a trefoil symbol was tattooed on his chest, 3 curved blades around a central circle. The man bore a wealth of scars and wrinkles in spite of his muscular physique, which marked him as an ancient soul. This immediately put Yuan on edge. There were weak cultivators and old cultivators, but there were no weak old cultivators.
I didn't even sense him.
Yuan was certain he had been alone in this room a moment ago.
He double-checked.
Moreover, he could count on one hand the number of people who had managed to sneak up on him in the past, cultivators included. His whole job revolved around avoiding that kind of ambush. Nobody's that quiet. Are you Yuan Guang? The stranger asked with a low, raspy voice that reminded Yuan of a cockroach batting its wings. He slowly stood up on his 2 feet with a trained dancer's elegance, his lean frame towering over Yuan's and his wheel halo spinning on its own. Or is it Jialong? The stranger didn't breathe or make any sound when he walked. Even scraps radiated a measure of qi, they simply couldn't process it due to their broken core. No creature should lack it, yet the man in front of Yuan felt like a walking void to his senses. This could only mean one thing. This stranger's control over his qi was so precise that he could completely mask it from detection. This man was unbelievably dangerous. His aura felt 1,000 times more threatening than Slash's and the Radhags combined, even the glimpse Yuan had caught of Revolver's true strength paled before the overwhelming threat in front of him. Every fiber of Yuan's body told him that he was now standing at the edge of a lethal precipice. The shadow of death lingered around this place. Yuan recalled the times when he had stood in a sect elder's presence while still a scrap. The same sensation of instinctual intimidation, of being prey in a predator's presence, coursed through his veins. Crossing two of the coils of infinity was nowhere near enough to cross the gulf in strength between them. Stolen from its rightful place, this narrative is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. One wrong word would spell Yuan's doom. He could feel it in his bones. That the stranger could kill him in an instant if he wished, the same way he had massacred everyone inside these walls. Yuan Guang, he replied cautiously, his mind furiously assessing the distance between himself and the nearest window. It was a long shot, but he might be able to make a break for the street outside with a well-timed recoil burst. Yuan was no coward, but the thought of fighting this man never crossed his mind. If he fought here, he would die short of a miracle.
End of the story.
The ancient cultivator crossed his arms in a pose of supreme confidence and authority. His eyes lingered on the bullet core stuck inside Yuan's forehead and flickered in recognition. A gunsoul, he said with what could pass for curiosity.
Interesting.
Who murdered you, child?
Yuan clenched his jaw.
If the man was familiar with gunsouls, he would likely target his bullet core first should a battle begin. Men working for the Inyong Khan.
The Inyong Khan?
The stranger hardly seemed surprised.
Makes sense.
Of course he would seek to get his claws on the cube too. I wonder how he learned of its existence.
The cube.
This man had been waiting to steal the package, same as Slash beforehand. This roused Yuan's curiosity. Warlords and cultivators of this stranger's caliber wouldn't work so hard to obtain a run-the-mill artifact. This is bigger than I thought.
Who are you?
Yuan dared to ask, his hands ready to unleash a recoil fist at the first sign of hostility. It would be a fool's errand, but at least he would die fighting. The stranger shrugged his shoulders. You may call me Manhattan. That's not your real name. I have forgotten mine long ago, if I ever had one in the first place. You may call me whatever you wish if Manhattan is not to your liking. The ancient cultivator dismissed the subject with a wave of his hand. I assume your murderers stole the cube, did they not? Why did you come here then?
Yuan tensed up.
Why would this man care? Still, he wasn't losing anything by answering the question and gaining a precious amount of time to think. To report the theft to my employer, and find out who betrayed my team's location.
Your employer?
The stranger's chalky lips morphed into an amused smile, revealing rows of blackened teeth.
You stand before him.
I commissioned this run, alongside 7 decoys meant to hide your position.
You're the client?
Yuan squinted slightly, though this answer didn't surprise him much. This Manhattan's knowledge and detailed information suddenly made a lot more sense. I came here to discreetly pick up my package, but the staff firmly insisted that they had lost contact with the deliverers. I sensed their lies and interrogated them. The man glanced at the nearest ash pile. Perhaps a bit more roughly than I should have, I'll admit. Yuan considered himself lucky to have avoided that kind of interrogation, at least so far. How did you know I would visit this place at all? Yuan wondered. Did the people of Gatesville somehow manage to inform this trading post of his arrival? I did not, but I had nothing to lose from waiting. I was meditating on how to proceed when you showed up. Manhattan intertwined his fingers in a strange prayer pose. Good thing I did too. I see which way the wheel spins now. Yuan squinted in confusion.
The wheel of karma.
What goes around comes around. You'll learn this should you reach my age. Manhattan's eyes lingered on Yuan, who suddenly realized that the strange cultivator had no eyelids to blink with. Duty and revenge are both shackles for the mind, but I applaud your professionalism. Self-discipline will lead you far. The compliment sounded strangely sincere, though Yuan was too tense to appreciate it. Moreover, his curiosity demanded answers. He wanted to learn what his partners died for. What was my team's package? He inquired. Manhattan appeared strangely cordial so far, so he might reveal some tidbit of information. Why would a cultivator of your caliber and the Inyong Khan seek it so fervently? To his surprise, the man actually deigned to answer his question. You were transporting the Cube of Natho, an artifact created during the chaotic years that preceded the Skybiter's ascension. I spent a great deal of resources securing its secret recovery and transport. As for what it does, Manhattan stroked his calcified chin. In the right hands it will be this world's salvation, in the wrong ones such as the Khan's, it will become a weapon of terrible power. That was as evasive an answer as they came, but Yuan's gut told him he wouldn't get anything more than that. He could sense that the stranger's indulgence had its limits. You will find your payment for the delivery behind the counter, Manhattan said before turning his back on Yuan, a supreme show of confidence, and a terrible insult, when in the presence of another cultivator. You may take my sutra scroll with you too, if you want it. I have no further use for it. You're letting me walk away? Yuan couldn't believe his ears. Even though I've lost the package? What good is anger? Such a narrow-minded emotion that blinds one's vision has no place within me. Manhattan let out a dry chuckle akin to a fireplace's noise. Besides, I suspect that your survival will lead the cube back to me in due time. The flow of karma will pull it to me. Yuan frowned in confusion. I don't understand. You will, once you learn to see farther ahead, Manhattan replied with the tone of a wise elder enlightening a foolish student. He stepped closer to the door, then suddenly stopped and peeked over his shoulder at Yuan. Though I am curious. What do you intend to do with your second life? Why ask at all? Yuan retorted. I can tell you don't care in the slightest. Nothing forces you to answer, child, Manhattan replied calmly. I have no interest in killing you, whether you indulge my idle curiosity or not. This man has no feelings. Yuan was sure of it now. The way Manhattan murdered dozens so casually and efficiently without a hint of rage or satisfaction had already been a warning, and their entire conversation had only solidified this impression. The cultivator gathered useful information and pointless trivia with equal, inhuman detachment. Yuan was nothing more than an insect who had suddenly caught his interest, and whom he would forget once his whim had passed. A void separated him from the rest of humanity.
He's a thing. A soulless, hollow thing.
I'll gear up, Yuan answered cautiously, track down my team's killers, and slaughter every last one of them. As I feared. Manhattan shook his head in disappointment. Revenge is not the Tao's way, Gunsoul. Such pointless ventures are what drive our souls to reincarnate in this doomed world. They weigh down our spirit and prevent us from reaching enlightenment. That bullet stuck in your head is not your salvation, but a leash that binds you. Yuan snorted at the man's contempt. I wouldn't be standing here without this bullet. It made me strong. Cultivators pursue power for its own sake, but their ambitions always turn into shackles that smother their development, Manhattan replied. They obsess over strength and immortality, heedless that a perfect object cannot coexist with a flawed world such as this one. Binding oneself to an imperfect universe drags us down, not up. Only through total detachment can we achieve true bliss. Is that why you're leaving that scroll? Yuan pondered as he glanced at the piece of paper lying on the ground. Sutra formulas indeed appeared to be written on its surface. No sect would abandon anything so valuable. Which is exactly why those fools will never reach the Tao. Hoarding knowledge turns it into an anchor. It enslaves you instead of freeing you. His curiosity satisfied, Manhattan opened the door and crossed its threshold. Cast away your pointless vendetta and dedicate yourself to your studies. Only then will you reach the Tao. His body then vanished in a green glow without a trace. For a few seconds, Yuan couldn't move an inch. He remained frozen in place with his fists raised for battle and his feet ready to run for his life. He half expected Manhattan to change his mind and come back to murder him. When he at least grew convinced that the ancient cultivator had spared his life, Yuan allowed him to let out a breath filled with tension. Every fiber of his being told him he had narrowly avoided a second death today. The cube of Natho, he muttered under his breath before glancing at the piles of ashes. Whoever had betrayed his team's location to the Inyong Khan was likely among them. It brought him a measure of satisfaction, even if he hadn't delivered the final blow himself, but he now wondered how far down the scented hole went. What were we transporting? Yuan had peeked behind the curtain and caught a glimpse of a greater scheme. He wasn't sure he liked what he saw. When Yuan questioned the locals about where he could buy guns, they all answered go to the Bullet Church. It didn't take him long to find the place on the eastern side of town. The enormous stone building loomed over these parts like a wayfinder's temple, its steps flanked by statues of ancient warriors adorned with newer bullet bandoliers and crude armor. Impact holes and deep gouges defaced the outer wall's murals. Yuan assumed that this place used to honor an ancient lost-age demigod slain during the world's unmaking. The courtyard was Yuan's dream, a bustling market of makeshift racks holding meticulously cleaned rifles, guns, shotguns, cannons, and lovingly crafted explosives lined up between crumbling pillars. Empty bullet casings and discarded magazines formed a carpet of brass and steel, and the lovingly acrid smell of gunpowder lingered everywhere. This would have looked like home for a firearm enthusiast like Yuan, if not for a few worrying details. He saw scraps praying before makeshift altars made from old crates honoring customized rifles and six-shooters. A man in a garb of leather and woven bullet casings applied gunpowder to two men's faces before letting them play a game of revolver roulette. A black-haired man examining the weapon racks sent Yuan a few worrying looks, and a large, tattered crimson banner proclaimed the place's motto in bold letters above the church's grand entrance. No gods or kings, only the gun. Yuan originally thought the name of Bullet Church was nothing more than a fancy marketplace's name, and he now realized his mistake. These people truly worshipped the gun.
Interesting.
Yuan wondered if they knew anything about gun souls and their abilities. He barely had time to look at the courtyard's weapons before a strange gunslinger walked out of the temple to greet him. The odd fellow wore a black cape billowing in the wind and a pair of revolvers around their belt, but their most distinctive feature was the gray bucket they wore over their head. 2 bullet holes allowed for a pair of green eyes to stare through it. Yuan couldn't tell whether it was a man or a woman until they spoke to him. Homing, bullet brother, the stranger said with a cheerful man's voice. I'm Gunpowder Inquisitor Bucket. How may I help you?
Bullet brother,
Yuan asked with a frown. The man didn't strike him as a gun soul and in fact appeared to lack any chi. Then again, Manhattan could disguise his aura. I'm a fellow roulette survivor too. Bucket pointed a gloved finger at Yuan's bullet core. The gun rewarded our devotion with life. A shot echoed out in the background as if on cue. Yuan peeked over his shoulder and watched a duo of onlookers drag one of the roulette players away, his head bleeding red from a big fat hole. Another volunteer bites the dust. Bucket made a sign on his chest with his fingers. Yuan recognized the vague shape of a gun. May the gun welcome him in the bullet hell, where he shall fight for all eternity. You're trying to become gun souls?
Yuan guessed. Has it ever worked?
Not yet, Bucket replied with disturbing enthusiasm. But the gun is bound to choose one of us eventually. Yuan hid his discomfort behind a mask of composure. He didn't blame these desperate scraps for latching onto any hope of becoming a cultivator, but he wasn't certain that the gun picked his chosen according to their faith. Revolver called him a demigod of ultra-violence and revenge who imbued vengeful dead like them with a half-life. Bucket's inability to recognize him as a gun soul told him everything he needed to know. These people were throwing their lives away on hearsay. Nonetheless, Yuan was smart enough not to question a cult's beliefs on their own temple's grounds. Such an act was bound to make a scene. I'm looking to trade, Yuan said upon opening his bag and revealing its contents: alcohol, housewares, and lost-age trinkets salvaged from the spirit train. I need weapons and ammo. Yuan had left Manhattan's Sutra Scroll for Orient and Holster to read after his encounter with Manhattan, where he informed his allies of his encounter in the Eastern Caravan office and then returned to Flesh Market with a bag full of supplies to trade. He didn't intend to take too long. A few locals already attempted to ransack the spirit train, though nothing came out of it. When he'd asked Orient what happened to them, the caretaker smiled sweetly at him and said, "A train's engine never has enough fuel." He didn't push for more details. Yuan knew Orient could take care of the occasional scrap robbers, but it was only a matter of time before local cultivators made a bid to take over the spirit train. A moving fortress of that size would prove too much of an attractive resource in the coming war. Yuan either had to quickly pick a side or skip town. You've knocked on the right door, bullet brother, Bucket replied while rubbing his hands together. What kind of weapons are you looking for? Handguns, revolvers, and shotguns, Yuan replied. He had already secured his group's provisions, and those were the weapons he was most familiar with.
Ah, the classics.
Bucket knocked a fist against his helmet, in what could pass for a gesture of contrition. Unfortunately, they're victims of their popularity lately. Yuan didn't hide his displeasure. The sect's already put in orders. Don't misunderstand me, bullet brother, we've got plenty of weapons. It's the ammo we lack. See, our bullet church has plenty of metalworkers to assemble firearms, but manufacturing quality casings and primers? Producing delicious gunpowder? Those require both scarce chemicals and tools. Yuan feared as much. Bullets were often more expensive than the firearms used to fire them, and sects preparing for war would naturally hoard them. The first and second coil cultivators making up the bulk of their troops died to them the same as any scrap. If you're looking for ammo, gunsoul, then we've got your fill. Yuan tensed up, his head snapping in the new voice's direction. The black-haired man who had been examining the guns earlier stepped forward. His gaunt frame belied the tense, wiry strength of a trained cultivator. His skin was ashen gray, his jet-black hair spiky and unkempt, his pupilless white eyes sinking into his emaciated skull. Loose purple rags hung on his thin frame, covering everything except for the head and his dirty bare feet, and a rusty chain coiled around his chest like a bandolier. A case of literary theft, This tale is not rightfully on Amazon. If you see it, report the violation. It was his smile that unsettled Yuan the most. Something in his yellow-toothed, manic grin felt downright menacing. This man was no Manhattan and hardly any older than Yuan himself, but he radiated a trained killer's aura. Moreover, he had recognized Yuan as a gun soul unlike the Bullet Church's members. This guy was no poser. "Who the fuck are you?" Yuan asked tersely. Bucket took a step back from them, his hands nervously grasping at his revolvers. "The name's Gaiak," said the grinning man. "A disciple of the Flesh Mansion sect. I've heard you came in that huge spirit train parked outside our fair city."
Yuan tensed up.
He knew this would happen sooner or later. What if I did? Then you've got my attention. You wouldn't have asked about sect orders if you were associated with one. The cultivator sized up Yuan, head to toe. "Are you a gun for hire?" Yuan crossed his arms. "Not for slave runs." "I'm only interested in a gun," Gaiak replied with a hint of amusement. "That spirit train of yours can stay parked for all we care. We just want you to shoot at some overly proud cyborgs for a few days. You kill, you get paid, you leave. Not a bad deal, eh?" Yuan remained cautious. He held no appreciation for slavers like the Flesh Mansion sect, and fighting the Metalists was way above his usual pay grade, but if they could offer him a third coil cheap pill. "What do you offer?" "Guns, ammo, clean pills too." Yuan didn't show any hint of interest, knowing that silence would lead Gaiak to drive up his price. "And a pardon for your theft." Yuan blinked in surprise. "What are you talking about?" "See, a human pillar was supposed to pass through this town on its way to Furyland. The sellers never arrived. She was supposed to come from the east, just like you did." Gaiak hummed into the air. "And you reek of a Haito-Bashara. Strange coincidence, don't you think?" "You should check your nose," Yuan replied coldly. "Or it might break soon." Gaiak chuckled in amusement at his thinly veiled threat, a typical cultivator's behavior. "You want to keep that child safe?" he asked. "Make sure no one will ever come after her again?" Yuan assessed the distance between them. A good recoil fist to the man's head would send it flying into the nearest wall. Those who try will do so at their peril. "I'm just saying we can spare you the trouble," Gaiak replied. "We can cure that girl.
Fix her core."
The Metalists lack the knowledge and techniques to perform the operation, but we have both. We'll swear an unspeakable vow, if that's what it takes." "An unspeakable vow?" That took Yuan aback. "Those who swear it do so on their core."
"Indeed."
Gaiak nodded sharply. "Oathbreakers forever surrender their right to cultivate. No cultivator will swear it lightly. And no sect would offer one to an outsider if they weren't in a deep bind. You need help that bad?" "I'm confident we'll win without you, Gunsoul," Gaiak replied calmly. Yuan couldn't tell whether he believed it or not. "But the slower we win, the more damage Flesh Market will take. What good are victories with ashes for a prize?" "I get it now," Yuan thought. Flesh Market was a key hub for the slave trade crossing the Fanged Coast. Its destruction would seriously cripple the Flesh Mansion sect's activities in the region. Holster is inconsequential to them in the long run. They can always make more of her, but they'll never find a better trade route. "I need to think about it," Yuan replied tersely. He didn't trust the Flesh Mansion sect, and the thought of helping them preserve their slave trade sickened him, but the offer was tempting. A third coil pill would improve his odds of victory once he tracked down Slash, and stripping Holster of her curse would ensure her safety in the long run. "Of course, but think quickly. Things are going to get pretty hot in this city very soon. You'll find us at the Flesh Volcano in the town center." Gaiak shrugged. "I suggest you either pick the winning side or get the hell out of there. Nothing but death awaits you if you join the Metalists." Yuan glared at him. "Is that a threat?"
"An observation," Gaiak replied.
"The Metalists want this turf so they can expand the screen city nearby, and they've already recruited a gunsoul of their own. They're more likely to sacrifice you to him than to give you a better offer."
"Another gunsoul?"
Something about the man's wording sent chills down Yuan's spine.
"Sacrifice? You don't know."
Gaiak's maniacal smirk somehow widened even further. "Think this through. Crossing the third means eating a clean chi pill or a spirit beast's core, but you gunsouls have another way available to you." Gaiak pointed at Yuan's bullet core. "You can hunt down another of your kindred," he said, "and bite that sweet bullet core."
Yuan clenched his jaw.
He hadn't considered that possibility, but now it sounded frighteningly plausible to him. Ascending through the third coil involved ingesting a huge amount of chi in a single buffet, and a gunsel's bullet acted like any spirit beast's core. An individual on the path of the gun could probably benefit from ingesting one. Revolver must have known. Yet he let Yuan live. Killing me for that bullet would have strengthened him, but he spared me nonetheless. Meeting kind and altruistic people in the unmade world was quite rare. Yuan considered himself fortunate that Revolver found him instead of a more unscrupulous gunsoul. That's the path of the gun for you, stranger, weeding out the weak till the lead harvest, or so I've heard. Gaiak took his leave.
Think wisely.
I pray we meet again as friends next time. Yuan watched him leave without a word, then turned to look at Bucket. To his horror, the man was kneeling in the dirt in prayer alongside a few other worshippers. A gunsoul has come to visit us. Bucket exclaimed for all to hear, his arms opened wide. Bless you for sending us this holy messenger, O gunfire father.
Quiet.
Yuan chided him, though he knew it was already too late. Word of his true nature would spread through Fleshmarket. Was it true what he said? There's another gunsoul in town allied with the metalists. Yuan was no expert on body language, but he detected a surge of disdain coursing through Bucket. That heretic Gatling man has indeed forsaken the path of the gun for that of the magnum opus. The Gunpowder Inquisitor rose back to his feet and began to plead with Yuan. Have you come to punish him? Yuan couldn't care less about this Gatling man or the Bullet Church's beliefs. However, if Gaiak told the truth, then the other gunsoul would likely hunt him down once he learned of Yuan's true nature. The metalists wouldn't set aside the chance to strengthen one of their soldiers in the coming conflict.
What a mess.
Who was that man?
Yuan asked.
Gaiak. Gaiak, the organ fetishist. Elder Polio's personal apprentice.
Bucket shuddered.
He always harvests body parts from the cultivators he has killed. Yuan pondered the information. The name of Elder Polio came up a lot when he asked who led the Flesh Mansion sect. His personal apprentice's word carried a lot of weight, so Gaiak's recruitment offer was most likely genuine. Nonetheless, assisting the Flesh Mansion sect in protecting their slave trade's interests left a sour taste in Yuan's mouth, nor did he fully believe that Gaiak's cohorts would let Holster leave with just a slap on her back.
I dislike sects, Yuan admitted.
Serving one only reinforced his distaste for them. And ultimatums even more so. Bucket didn't say a word for a moment, then joined his hands. Well, honored gunsoul. If I told you there was a way to waste both sides, would it pique your interest? Yuan raised an eyebrow. At this point, he might as well explore all his options.
I'm listening.
Have you heard of the ammo bog?
No,
Yuan replied flatly. It's a marsh near Fleshmarket, and the holy resting place of the gunsoul who gloriously defeated Tsar Zoa years ago, Bucket explained. Yuan recalled that the name belonged to a nuclear cultivator who Revolver mentioned on his way to Gatesville. Her bullet core bloomed into a fertile farm of magazines and gunpowder. You can pick an ammo harvest there, since your spirit train could load up on quite the haul.
Yuan quickly caught on.
Bucket suggested solving the ammo shortage, then equipping both sects to worsen the conflict. Quite the interesting strategy. Letting the sects slaughter each other would spare him both the trouble of dealing with Gatling Man and the Flesh Mansion sect's retaliations. Yuan would be on his way to track down Slash by the time a winner emerged. Lots of bystanders would die in the crossfire though. Yuan told himself that he didn't owe them anything. The Metalists and the Flesh Mansion sects would kill anybody caught between them anyway, guns or no guns. Delivering ammo to Fleshmarket would be like any other courier job. He would make a delivery and then let them duke it out. Moreover, if eating another gunsel's bullet core would let him transcend to the third coil. Wait, Yuan said as he noticed an inconsistency. If there's such a place near Fleshmarket, why haven't you harvested the ammo yourself already? The gunsel's ghost kills everyone who intrudes upon the ammo bog, Bucket said. But as a fellow chosen of the gun, I'm sure you'll be the exception.
Yuan sighed. He'd expected as much. Still, it didn't hurt to check. The spirit train left Fleshmarket at sunset for its first courier job. Yuan sealed a pretty good deal with Bucket. The man would board with 6 Bullet Church cultists and enough crates to house a sizable cargo, then receive a free ride back and forth to the ammo bog for a bullet harvest. Yuan would provide transportation and security in exchange for money, supplies, and his pick of weapons and ammo. Gatling Man stole the holy minigun and the Flesh Mansion sect purchased all our sniper rifles, Bucket had told him before presenting him with twin wonders. Henceforth, we entrust you with the Saint Heckler and the Kalash Angel. Yuan spent most of the evening examining these new toys while Orient served dinner in the restaurant wagon. He had already used submachine guns like the Saint Heckler in the past, but he had never managed to get his hands on a true assault rifle like the Kalash Angel.
His body shivered in pleasure the moment he touched the handle. His finger traced a line from one end of the rifle to the barrel's end, delighting at the smooth sensation of his skin pressing against the stainless steel. Handguns would forever remain his favorite firearms, but this assault rifle captured his heart like no other. "Are you enjoying your dinner so far?" Orient asked her guests as she finished serving the dessert, an assortment of dry cakes and root vegetables. "It was perfect, milady," Bucket replied after sneaking food into his helmet without removing it. Yuan wondered how he could eat at all this way. "You are spoiling us." "The pleasure is all mine," Orient replied with a kind smile. "It has been so many years since I last welcomed guests within my halls. I've missed the experience very much." Orient certainly treated her passengers better than stowaways. "At least she's enjoying herself." Yuan glanced at Holster, who sat next to him and lowered her gaze whenever the Bullet Church cultists so much as looked in her direction. Orient tried to convince her to interact with their guests, to no avail. I can't blame her for feeling unsafe with strangers. Yuan thought it would be better if Holster grew acclimated to guests, especially if the team started taking on more courier jobs. Passengers would then become a common occurrence his charge would have to live with. Yuan didn't trust anyone, but the cultists venerated him the way high-level cultivators inspired or among scraps. They wouldn't bother Holster on his watch, and if they did, Orient could take care of them. Nothing could escape her notice inside the spirit train's confines. One of the cultists took a pause from his dinner and looked through the windows with apprehension. Night had fallen, and the moon was pitch black. "Sorry to doubt you, milady, but will this spirit train truly protect us from moonburns?" "You are perfectly safe so long as you do not open the windows," Orient reassured him with a pleasant smile. "I do question why honored guest Yuan insisted on leaving at twilight instead of the morning, when we would have had better visibility." "Because we're less likely to be followed and attacked this way," Yuan replied. Moonburning didn't distinguish between sides, so few dared to launch raids at night, especially with clear skies. Either sect may try to intercept us or steal the shipment. Bucket didn't miss an opportunity to kiss Yuan's butt. A wise plan, as expected from a holy gun soul. Only a sniper's mind like yours could possess such a jade beauty like Lady Orient for a wife. Yuan suppressed a shiver of unease. In his experience, scraps either resented cultivators or worshipped the ground they walked on. Both behaved that way for the same reason: cultivators could do things most people could only dream of. Yuan disliked Bucket's adoration because it felt unearned. He didn't receive it because of what he had done, but because of what he was. Moreover, that behavior led to expectations. Scraps worshipping cultivators demanded attention, protection, or favor, none of which Yuan was willing to give beyond his contact's obligations. "Orient is not my wife," Yuan grumbled before Bucket could get any ideas. "Besides, jade beauty? Orient was a redhead." "Thank you for the compliment though, honored guest Bucket," Orient said, her smile unwavering. "If you would kindly let me show you to your cabins next? We should arrive at our destination in a few hours, and a day of hard work awaits you tomorrow." "Oh, of course, milady." Bucket jumped out of his seat, as did the other cultists. One stuffed his mouth with dessert and nearly choked in his hurry to follow Orient into the passenger wagon, much to Yuan's amusement. Orient reminded him so much of Mingxia. His old teammate possessed a combination of refined poise and easy charm that let her lead people by the nose. Especially men. Now that he was alone with Holster, Yuan grabbed the plates, scraped every crumb and stain he could find with a knife, and then bottled them up in a small container. He had starved too many times in the past to waste food now. "Have you taken a look at the scroll?" Yuan asked Holster while washing the dishes. His charge nodded, before shifting in her seat and making hand signs he didn't recognize. "I don't understand." "Miss Holster is asking what a wife is," Orient said after she returned alone from the passenger car. "I admit I find the concept a bit difficult to grasp too. Would you mind enlightening us?" "A wife is a waste of time," Yuan replied gruffly. Hitting on women, like Zholong used to whenever they visited a new place, always struck him as a pointless distraction. A husband too. Orient frowned in confusion. "Why would Mr. Bucket consider me a waste of time? I always arrive early." Yuan quickly realized that explaining the concept of wife to a living train might be too tall a mountain to climb. "It's not important," he replied in an attempt to change the subject. "What about the scroll? Did you take a look?" Orient's smile thinned noticeably. "We did." Yuan squinted as Holster returned from the last wagon with the scroll itself. He hardly recognized it. The tattered, ancient piece of paper looked almost brand new. The original document was tainted by the same poison that corrupted my predecessor's Thunderlands, Orient explained with a hint of unease. Considering what happened to her, I thought it wise to use my power and restore it to a prior state rather than risk Miss Holster growing sick, or worse, transforming into a radhag myself. I might have erased a few sentences in the process, but I hope you will understand my caution. Unauthorized tale usage. If you spot this story on Amazon, report the violation. Better safe than sorry. Yuan crossed his arms. Manhattan's generosity made more sense now. His gift had been poisoned. So you're saying that the scroll was irradiated? Most certainly, Orient confirmed. Yuan didn't like this one bit. Manhattan already gave away the same aura as the irradiated city near Gatesville. Either he found the scroll in a similar place, or he followed the same nuclear path as the late Tsar Zoa. He had the gut feeling nothing good would come out of Manhattan getting his hands on the cube. Would he be strong enough to steal it back from the Inyong Khan? Yuan banished these thoughts from his mind. Nothing would come out of involving himself in high-level cultivators' affairs. Sutras come in multiple forms, Orient explained after unfurling the document. Detailed drawings of hand gestures formed the bulk of its content, alongside ancient verses written in the Sanskrit language. Cultivators love to use that one to record their important texts. This scroll covers complex talisman scripts alongside mantras and mudra combinations. Yuan quickly recalled the words. Mantras are sounds and mudras are gestures, right? Indeed, honored guest, Orient confirmed with a nod. They carry less power than more complex sutras and must be practiced in a sequence to have any effect, but they have more immediate applications than grander rituals. Orient joined her thumbs and ring fingers, then widened her arms. Yuan immediately recognized the pose. He'd seen many Stoneskin sect cultivators practice it during their meditations. This is the Prithvi Mudra, Orient explained. It calls upon the earth to witness the user's stability. When a cultivator born under an earth zodiac sign adopts this gesture while sitting on the ground and utters the mantra Prithvi, it temporarily aligns their chi to telluric forces and reinforces their posture. To think that the Stoneskin sect's members practiced a sutra in the open right in front of Yuan's eyes. He never understood why, since mimicking this posture never did anything for him, but now he did. Sutras required specific conditions to activate, and if that one only worked with earth-aligned cultivators, then Scraps couldn't benefit from it. Yuan browsed the mudras. Besides his own inability to read Sanskrit properly, he noticed a glaring issue with the poses. I need at least one hand to shoot. Yuan could always rely on the recoil fist, but his path truly shone when he used a weapon. Most of these mudras involve both of them. Most but not all. Orient pointed at one of the drawings, which represented a hand with the index and ring fingers bent and the others straight up. The Shukatunda mudra, for example, can increase a projectile's accuracy when included in the proper sequence. Two-handed gestures also have useful out-of-battle applications. Holster joined her hands together. She intertwined her fingers except for the pinkies that now faced each other, and then whispered a few syllabi so low Yuan hardly caught them. Mahamayuri. This is the Mahamayuri mudra, which cleanses the user of poison and toxins, Orient said with a sorrowful look. Miss Holster thought it would lift her curse, but alas, the sutra had no effect on her condition. Yuan shifted uncomfortably. About that. A man from the Flesh Mansion's sect approached me earlier. Holster froze in fear like a deer caught by a wolf spirit. Her skin paled until it gained the color of bone. I'm not returning you to them, Yuan immediately reassured. But that man said he could cure you if I did his bidding. There's still time to make a decision. Holster shook her head so fast and so abruptly Yuan feared she would snap her own neck. She grabbed his shirt, imploring him in silence with eyes full of abject terror. Miss Holster, please calm down. Orient awkwardly put her hands on Holster's shoulders to reassure her, though she clung too tightly to Yuan to let him go. The Flesh Mansion sect is far away. You are safe with us. Holster buried her face against Yuan's shirt and gripped his clothes with all her strength. Orient whispered kind words in her ear and then looked at Yuan with a firm face. Miss Holster has no wish of encountering the Flesh Mansion sect again. He could have guessed that on his own. We'll find another way then. Yuan couldn't blame Holster for reacting this way. He didn't know much about the Haito Bashara procedure, but it was probably quite painful. Don't worry, Holster. They'll never touch you again. His words reassured Holster a little, but she didn't let go of his shirt. Yuan ended up spending most of the evening sitting in the last car with her until she fell asleep, while Orient helped him review a series of mantras and mudras. Tripitaka, Shukatunda, Trishula, Yuan muttered to himself as he practiced the hand signs. Joining his fingers and uttering the words quickly enough proved more difficult than he expected. Archer's glory. You are making good progress, honored guest Yuan, Orient complimented him. This sutra will greatly increase your next projectile's accuracy and ensure that it hits its target. If I live long enough to finish it, Yuan replied gruffly. Every breath mattered in battle. He would waste precious time and energy if he couldn't complete the combination quickly enough. I am certain you will master these sutras with practice, Orient encouraged him. I shouldn't say so much, but Miss Holster hasn't been slacking either. She's working very hard on a gift for you.
Yuan blinked. A gift?
I won't say more, Orient said before patting the sleeping Holster on the head. She cares for you very much. Yuan didn't know what to say. The only people who gave him gifts were his old teammates. The idea of receiving one from Holster filled him with sheepish embarrassment. He didn't think he would inspire such gratitude from her. It's not a bad feeling though. Yuan listened to Holster snoring on his lap.
So young and fragile.
I could get used to it. Orient suddenly straightened up. Her serene smile twisted into a strange expression, with her eyes brightening like headlights and her breath turning to steam. As for her hands, they contorted and tensed into fists. Yuan squinted in confusion. What's going on? We are approaching our destination. Yuan finally recognized the expression, a pale imitation of human fear. I sense an authority coming from it. Yuan stared at Orient in disbelief for a moment. You're kidding. I am not, honored guest Yuan. Orient raised her head, as if to listen to invisible forces Yuan couldn't perceive. It clogs the ley line like a quagmire of lead and gunpowder. I thought this ammo bog suffered from a lingering curse, but its boundaries. This is a true imaginary space. Orient had to be mistaken. It had to be a patch of corrupted thunderlands or a screen city, or any other supernatural phenomenon plaguing the unmade world. If it was an authority. Yuan recalled a lesson which a Stoneskin elder once gave to his arrogant young student. To cross the fifth coil, a cultivator must expand their core outside their body. They overwrite the world's chi and paint over it with their very soul. They temporarily gain authority over a portion of the Tao. It's an incredibly difficult and dangerous feat that approaches the divine. It was so difficult, in fact, that the fifth coil was widely considered the gulf that separated the great from the legendary. No elder in the Stoneskin sect ever achieved it. One came close, only to accidentally rupture their own core and kill themselves. Worse, every authority technique was unique to each user, since it represented both their chosen path and true self. Yuan had heard cultivators theorize that a wayfinder's cosmic influence was simply the result of their authority becoming part of the universe's natural laws. The ammo bog wasn't merely a place, it was the physical expression of someone's soul. A gunsel's core overwriting the universe. Two key details bothered Yuan. First of all, an authority demanded immense reserves of chi and concentration to sustain, since the world actively fought to return to its original state. The longest recorded duration was 4 hours, and the ammo bog existed for years according to Bucket. Even if the gunsoul buried in the ammo bog was a legend among legends, their core shouldn't have been able to sustain it for so long.
And second,
can a ghost use an authority, Orient?
Yuan asked.
No, Orient replied with unease.
No, they cannot.
Bucket told him that the ammo bog was the burial site of a dead gunsel's bullet core, yet Revolver said that they could survive anything so long as said core remained intact. Bucket should check his intel, Yuan thought, his arms crossed. That dead gunsoul of his is very much alive. They reached the ammo bog by dawn. As Bucket promised, the bog grew inside a small, sunken valley west of Fleshmarket. The spirit train stopped on the buried remnants of a ruined station whose elevated position spared it from the dead White Sea's expansion. Yuan only had to look out the window to take a look at their destination below. The area was everything Bucket promised, a 10 kilometers wide marsh of smoke and metal. Lead-soaked soil housed sprouting casings that bloomed into bullets under the shadow of hollow iron trees with barrels for branches. Streams of liquid gunpowder winded between the barrel trees, their surfaces gleaming with flecks of metal, and the slightest spark would ignite them into a fiery detonation. Yuan could smell their acridness from here. A thick fog of gunsmoke hung over the area, so Yuan couldn't see its center clearly. The frontiers were clearly demarcated though. The ammo bog formed a perfect circle surrounded by both rocks and the dead White Sea, and the frontier was too sharp to be natural. Yuan had never seen an authority, but closing his eyes and focusing on the land's chi told him much. The ammo bog radiated power like a furnace, to the point Yuan couldn't sense anything inside it. It was like standing next to an iron sun. If living creatures existed inside it, he couldn't detect them.
Metal, Yuan guessed.
Revolver's aura radiated fire, but this place had another elemental affinity.
Same as mine.
Observing Revolver's chi already floored Yuan in the past, but whoever created the ammo bog was in a different league entirely. It was almost oppressive. The absence of any sect outposts worried him too. Many cultivators wouldn't think twice about sending scraps into death's jaws to forage for resources. The ammo bog wasn't too far from Flesh Market, so it should be easy to organize harvest runs. If neither the Metalists nor the Flesh Mansion sect bothered with this place, then it was probably more trouble than it was worth. "That's the ammo bog all right, sir," Bucket said with enthusiasm. He and his fellow gun cultists were already unloading crates to stuff bullets in. "We'll just have to bend over to reap the ammo harvest." "If it was so easy, more people would frequent this place," Yuan replied gruffly. "You said the Gunsel's ghost attacks intruders? How?" "Mostly she just shoots visitors," Bucket explained, almost cheerfully. "Sometimes she doesn't, but her voice warns you to turn back before she changes her mind." Enlightening. Yuan glanced at Orient and Holster, both of whom stared at the ammo bog in equal uneasiness. Unlike Bucket's band, they could sense the oppressive power radiating from this cursed land. "There is still time to turn back, honored guest Yuan," Orient warned him. "It would bother me to leave empty-handed," Yuan confessed. "What are our other options?" "We could continue westward to Battletown," Orient suggested. "However, this authority clogs the main ley line to sustain itself. It would force me to take a large detour to bypass it. I'm not ready to confront Slash yet." Yuan would have preferred to get his hands on a pill and cross the third coil first. "And I'll have to pick a side if we return to Flesh Market." "Fear not, sir," Bucket encouraged him. "I'm sure the ghost of Ammo Bog will welcome a fellow gunsoul with open firearms." At least one of them showed enthusiasm. Yuan sensed Holster tugging at his pants in an attempt to grab his attention. His charge pointed at the ammo bog. "Wait, do you want me to go there?" Yuan asked. His scowl only deepened when Holster nodded back, albeit hesitantly. "Did you sense anything?" Holster bit her lower lips, then looked at Orient. "Sorrow," the caretaker translated. "Miss Holster says her soul is broken." "Her? The gun soul?" Yuan raised an eyebrow. "Broken how?" Holster made a series of Madras signs, half of which Yuan did not recognize. "Egg," he said, trying to translate the symbols. "A cracked cosmic egg?" "A cracked core," Orient translated. "Miss Holster believes that this Gunsel's core is broken somehow." "A broken core? Was that even possible?" The only way Yuan knew to lose one was to either break an unspeakable oath or undergo a human pillar procedure, both of which prevented the user from using techniques at all, let alone an authority. You might be reading a pirated copy. Look for the official release to support the author. Yuan decided to investigate after a moment's consideration. The ammo bog was certainly dangerous, but he was curious about its creator. Learning what happened to her may give him more insight into his own condition. "I'll go with Bucket and the others," he told Orient and Holster. "The two of you stay here. If we haven't returned by sunset," Yuan marked a short pause. "Leave for a safer place." While Holster paled in concern, Orient proved far less sentimental. "Understood," she replied with professionalism. "I shall take care of Miss Holster should the worst come to pass." "I swear I'll be back shortly," Yuan promised Holster. She seemed to hesitate to follow him for a brief instant until he patted her on the shoulder. "Be a good girl and keep your iron close, understand?" Holster bit her lip before nodding obediently. Leaving in Orient's care, Yuan escorted Bucket and the others down a trail and closer to the ammo bog. He took both the Saint Heckler and Kalash Angel with him, keeping the former holstered at his side and the latter strapped to his back with a leather belt. Yuan would have loved to test these weapons and check how his gunsoul powers synergized with them, but alas, the ammo shortage would make it a waste of good bullets for the time being. The Kalash only had 30 rounds in its magazine and the Saint Heckler 40. Each shot counted. He's the gun, dark and dire, quick to anger, indiscriminate fire. Bucket sang to himself. In his sight, everyone's the same, at the barrel's end, each life a fleeting frame. Soon the cultists joined him in some sort of gun-worshipping folk song. Yuan ignored them and continued to walk in utter silence. "A soul for a bullet, his immortal fame, the gun will never die, his boastful claim," sang the Bullet Brothers. "He'll dance the lead dance, till no one can pull the trigger, leaving ruins and whispers, his hopes ever grimmer." If the spirit train's arrival didn't alert the local gunsoul of their presence, their off-key singing probably did the trick. The group soon reached the frontier of the ammo bog. White flowers bloomed on one side of a curved line, and bullet seeds grew in lead-rich soil on the other. Yuan scanned the area in search of the gunsoul ghost. He couldn't see much through the gunsmoke fog and the barrel trees. "Is someone there?"
Yuan called out to the marsh. I am Yuan Guang, a gunsoul like you. I've come to talk. Only the sound of the wind whistling through the barrel trees answered him, its song resembling the echo of gunfire. The group waited a moment before Yuan cautiously stepped through the Amabog's frontier. He expected a shift across reality, like the kind he experienced when crossing into the Thunderlands. Entering the Amabog proved a very different experience. Yuan sensed a veil separating it from the rest of the world, but it was weak, diffuse, disorganized. It felt like entering a pocket of hot air, noticeable yet far from disorienting. Whatever force maintained the front between this authority and the rest of the universe failed to properly secure its border. However, Yuan immediately detected a diffuse, feminine presence around him. The Thunderlands had been chaos incarnate, a boiling cauldron of qi and sorcery without reason or purpose. The Radhag was born to serve as its incarnation rather than its ruler. The Amabog was the complete opposite. A single will controlled every inch of its territory, holding claim to its land and air. This was a place of order, and the cultivator controlling it immediately detected any intruder that did not belong here. Yuan's grip on his submachine gun tightened. He waited either for an attack or an invitation, receiving neither. The cultists behind him exchanged glances. May the faithful step forward. Bucket shouted. He walked towards the frontier, only for another cultist to quickly beat him to it in an attempt to prove his dedication. A bullet struck the man in the forehead, blowing his brains out and killing him the second he crossed the frontier. The cultists let out shouts of surprise, but Yuan had already drawn his submachine gun before the cultist's corpse hit the ground. Behind me! He ordered the others, but Bucket disobeyed him. The man attempted to grab his fellow worshipper's body and drag him out of the Amabog, only to suffer a headshot of his own the moment he crossed the veil between worlds. The round hit his helmet with such strength that it propelled Bucket backward into a bed of white flowers. Yuan aimed at the attack source and saw nothing beyond the thick gray fog. He immediately retreated outside the veil and quickly checked the wounded. To his surprise, Bucket quickly rose back up. His sturdy helmet had blocked the round right above the eye holes, saving his life. Praise the gun bullet, brother. Bucket prayed with his arms wide open. Yuan had never seen someone so happy to be shot in the head. I have been spared once more. Good for him, Yuan thought grimly after checking the other cultist. Unlike Bucket, that one had lost a third of his skull and brain matter. Somehow, I don't think he'll rise up as a gunsoul. Sniper rounds, Yuan noted after checking the ammunition and the corpse's head wound. Which meant the shooter could have struck from a mile away. That or it could have been one of the trees. Yuan knew better than to expect logic from the physical representation of someone's soul. Those were warning shots. He had seen Revolver blow up dunes by charging his bullets with chi. A stronger cultivator could have decimated the entire group with a single round had they decided to. Moreover, only the cultists were shot at. Yuan cautiously stepped over the veil once more to test his theory. No sniper struck him this time either. He alone was invited. She'll only let me pass. Yuan leaned on and picked a bullet seed from the ground. He immediately recognized the smooth shape of a .22 LR cartridge. He tossed it outside the ammo bog and received no punishment for it. She won't stop me from harvesting ammo either. Bless our lost brother. Bucket prayed over his fellow cultist's corpse. His soul shall feast in the shooting grounds of bullet hell. Yuan considered his options. Bucket had guessed correctly. He could easily complete his job by picking up rounds like a farmer with his crops and then handing them over to the cultists. The local gunsoul seemed to suffer his presence on her territory. Nonetheless, it would be quite improper to forage on someone's lands without paying them homage. The gunsoul's tolerance might only extend so far. Give him the last rites sutra and return to the spirit train, Yuan ordered Bucket and the others as he moved the dead cultist body over to them. I'll talk to her alone. Yuan hated fog. Every gunslinger heavily relied on their sharp eyes, and their hearing to a lesser degree. A dense mist reduced both. Thick gunsmoke prevented Yuan from seeing further than his submachine gun's tip and muffled all noise around him. It was a miracle he could breathe at all. A scrap would have asphyxiated thrice over by now, but the acrid fumes didn't bother Yuan's lungs in the slightest. His gunsoul nature likely spared him from it. Trying to see the path ahead with his chi sense yielded no result either. The Amabog's energies clouded his sight. Someone could have stood behind him with a gun barrel pressed against his skull and he wouldn't have been able to tell. Other people had died in this mist too. He had encountered 4 corpses on his way across the bog, their bones buried in liquid gunpowder cesspools and under cartridge hills. All their skulls bore signs of headshots. Fog made Yuan feel powerless. Vulnerable. Nonetheless, he had no issues finding his way through it.
A clear trail paved with iron plating crossed the ammo bog. The gun smoke grew thinner around it too. The further he advanced, the more Yuan grew convinced that the ammo bog's mistress was guiding him to her dominion. To his relief, the fog slowly began to clear. Yuan found himself ascending a hill covered in a thin brass sheen and thorny bushes growing shrapnel shrubs instead of flowers. The floor made a crunching sound when Yuan's feet stepped on it. Clusters of cartridges formed parodies of rock formations. A monstrous gun's muzzle rose at the hill's peak and vomited liquid gunpowder onto its steel slope. Any spark should have blown the place up to kingdom come, but a makeshift forge and its roaring fire stood in its shadow nonetheless. The Amabog's mistress worked there, pouring a small pot of molten lead into a bullet mold. Yuan wasn't sure what he had expected to see.
A living gun?
A demon queen who had cast away her humanity in search of greater strength? A beauty that defied description? When compared to Manhattan and Revolver, the woman in front of him appeared strangely human in comparison.
She did look fearsome, however.
Her long, fiery hair bore the crimson shade of blood. A dark blindfold covered her eyes and left only her scowling mouth visible. A wide-brimmed black hat adorned with raven feathers cast her face in obscurity, and a tattered burgundy cloak billowed over a practical attire of iron plates, reinforced leather, and sturdy boots. She wore a belt laden with ammunition strapped to her waist alongside a small, archaic rifle that belonged in an old-world shrine rather than on the battlefield. Her right arm hid under her cloak, while her left hand held on to a scorchingly hot pot filled with molten lead. The terrible heat didn't seem to bother her, nor did she use tongs to manipulate her tools. That woman didn't carry the same aura of overwhelming menace as Manhattan before her, but Yuan's bullet core began to pulse the moment he laid eyes on her. She radiated a strange kind of serene grace and poise, and the air distorted around her person. Space itself seemed to twist in small and nearly imperceptible ways when she moved her head. She kept her back turned to Yuan, though he sensed her attention on him. She didn't need eyes to see him. When she moved from one side of her workbench to the other to inspect her cooling molds, her feet left traces of gunpowder and carried the sharp clink of bullets hitting a concrete floor. "If you have come for my core, Gunsoul, then heed my words," the woman spoke with a voice that reminded Yuan of a bullet's whistle, soft yet deadly. "I am Ark, the rifle woman." She pried a mold open with her left hand and picked up a bullet. Glowing sutras were carved on its surface and shone with power. "And I've never been defeated." It was a tall claim to make, but the arrogant cultivators who pretended as much always betrayed a hint of insecurity in their voice, but Yuan didn't detect any from this woman's words. That was a statement, not a boast. This woman had slain and crushed all challengers she ever faced. Yuan pondered his answer. Between the warning shots, the lack of hostility coming from her, and the fact that she hadn't blown his head off yet, he assumed that she wouldn't attack unless he struck first. The gulf in power between them was unfathomable, but she lacked Manhattan's obvious malevolence. "I thought you were a ghost," Yuan confessed. "Is that what those bullet church fools told you?" Ark began to trim the excess lead from the bullet with her nails. They cut through the metal as easily as knives through flesh. They know nothing of the curse they cravenly revere. They would be wise to find a better god. "Is that why you let me come here?" Yuan asked. He noted that she called the gun and Gunsouls a curse. Quite the strange statement to make for someone so far ahead in their shared path. "So I would tell them to fuck off?" "Yes," she replied bluntly. Yuan didn't mind carrying that message, but he considered himself enough of a professional not to leave empty-handed. "We came to pick ammo," he said. "There's going to be a sect war in Flesh Market. We want to supply both sides so they wipe out each other." "I don't give a fuck." Ark examined the finished bullet. Did she have eyes underneath her blindfold, or was she simply going through the motions? "Tell those idiots to leave by sunset, then never return. Anyone who stays any longer will die. I'm sick of foragers." Stolen from its rightful place, this narrative is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. This isn't going well. Yuan wished Mingxia was with him. She would know how to smooth things over. "Won't you at least tell me why?" "Because I don't like any of you." "Not the ammo thing." Yuan crossed his arms and tried to pick the best words possible. "Why are you here? Why languish in this place for years?" Ark didn't answer him immediately. Yuan wasn't an expert at reading body language, but she seemed surprised by the question. "Few must have asked it." "I'm waiting," she finally said.
"For what?" "For the gun."
"Is that what that bullet is for?"
Yuan guessed.
"To kill the gun once he comes for you?" "Even if you kill the gun, you will never kill the gun." Ark tossed her forged bullet aside. It looked like a waste of lead to Yuan, but he supposed it wasn't the perfect projectile she hoped for. If you're ever in a position to kill it, stay your hand. It'll spare you a special kind of hell.
Yuan flinched. What kind?
You don't want to find out. Why were all high-level cultivators so goddamn cryptic and evasive? I want to find out.
You don't.
Ark replied firmly. Bury your gun and spend the rest of your half-life in peace. Open a shop, plant crops, find a wife or a boy toy, whatever suits you. Yuan pointed at her rifle. You haven't buried your gun. I guess that means I'll die a fool.
Again.
Ark waved her hand at the workbench. The gunsmoke cloud around them condensed into a pot and magically turned into lead. Ask me what's on your mind or fuck off. Instead of answering immediately, Yuan first picked up the bullet she discarded. The projectile had cooled off considerably, but still remained warm. Sanskrit scripts covered every inch of its shell and burned with chi. This simple bullet packed nearly as much power as a lower cultivator's core. A rifle firing, it would likely inflict more damage than a rocket launcher. This person was a master of the path of the gun. Teach me, Yuan asked politely but firmly. She didn't even consider it.
No.
What do you have to lose? Yuan insisted. If you're waiting to die either way. You'll use the techniques I teach you to kill, Ark stated. We all rise to avenge a wrong done to us.
Yuan scoffed.
The world would be better with less marauders and slavers in it. Ark finally deigned to face him. Now that he took a good look at her face, Yuan noticed black burn marks under the blindfold. You don't get it, do you?
Yuan scowled.
Get what? That cycle of bloodshed, that's how the gun feeds. It plays both sides to keep the war going. Ark sat on her workbench, a scowl forming on her face. Kill the men who killed you, and you'll find that one of them rises up from the dead with a bullet for a heart, or it'll be one of their loved ones seeking payback. Then they'll go after the people you care about, and the death spiral will repeat again and again. It happened to me, and it'll happen to you. So what, Yuan should let Slash and his cronies off the hook for murdering his friends? The mere thought of Jialong and Mingxia being tossed into a ditch, their unjust death forgotten, filled him with anger. I'll take that bet, he said.
Your loss. Ark shrugged.
Another came before you for the same reason, a cyborg. He tried to kill me for my bullet core when I denied him, and bitterly regretted it. I told him to abandon the path of the gun if he could and sent him packing. Yuan picked up on the veiled threat, but he didn't give up. He had a chance in a lifetime to learn from a true master of the gun and couldn't let it pass. Even scraps of information would teach him much. What would Mingxia do in his place? She had a motto whenever negotiations stalled: don't ask what they can do for you, but what you can do for them. Easy words to say, and difficult ones to apply in this case. What could Yuan offer to a high-level cultivator? He had no priceless artifact to trade away, nor the kind of talent that would interest a teacher eager to pass on their legacy. All he had was information. I've heard your core is broken, Yuan said. Is it true? Ark studied him for a moment before answering. I do not control my authority anymore. What you see isn't Headshot Forge's natural state. Headshot Forge. Yuan couldn't help but chuckle in amusement, even after encountering gruesome sights like dead bodies buried in gunpowder. People call it the ammo bog. Good for them, they're wrong, Ark replied with a snort. Years ago, I fought a death-worshipping cultivator with way too much power. I defeated him, but he destroyed my body and damaged my soul on his way to the nowhere. Damaged your soul? The very concept frightened Yuan. Everyone knew that a spirit survived the body's death and moved on to reincarnate. The dying took comfort in the fact that their immortal essence would survive for a new round at life. How? He had an authority of his own. Ark waved her hand at the gunsmoke fog and muzzle mountain. Authorities are physical manifestations of a cultivator's core and will in the physical world. What do you think happens when two of them manifest in the same spot? Yuan's jaw clenched on its own. They clash and take damage.
They do, Ark confirmed.
My squire, who knew nothing of our immortality, planted my bullet core in this land. My flesh grew back and healed, my bullet core did not. Authorities have restrained, closed boundaries to maximize their potency. Mine has open borders. I can't stop my chi from leaking out. That's why the veil was so weak, Yuan thought. He suspected entering a normal authority would have been akin to crossing a patch of thunderlands. Ark's own spread widely until it thinned out, like a puddle of water. She still packs enough chi to taint everything in a 5-kilometer radius of herself. You use feng shui to tap upon the local ley line and stabilize your authority, Yuan guessed.
Ark nodded slowly. If I don't, I leak chi until I lose consciousness and reactivate my authority as soon as I wake up. Headshot Forge automatically attacks anyone caught in the premises unless I focus on sparing them, so I'm a miles-wide unnatural disaster. It's even worse with scraps like those bullet church fools. Since they don't have a strong chi signature to latch on, I can't react to their presence before my authority kills them. A chill traveled down Yuan's spine as he put two and two together. The corpses he found on his way to Ark died far too close to her location, while her power killed a cultist the moment he crossed into her territory. In all likelihood, they simply had the misfortune of being within range of her malfunctioning authority when it first activated. My options were to kill myself, become a mobile disaster, or stay put. I chose the last one. Ark lost interest, grabbed her molten lead cup, and began to pour it into the mold she used earlier. 'Twas nice speaking to another gunsoul, but I'm tired of it. I could help, Yuan suggested. Orient and Holster might have ideas on how to proceed. If a core can be cracked, then it should be reparable. I've tried everything, Ark replied with fatalism. What do you have to lose from letting us try then?
Time, Ark shot back.
You're wasting mine right now. She won't believe in me. Though it annoyed Yuan, he could understand why she would react with skepticism. He was a newborn gunsoul who barely crossed the second coil. If a master cultivator failed to find a cure after years of meditation, what hope did he have? I've only one last card to play. I think I've encountered a nuclear cultivator in Flesh Market, Yuan said. Ark crushed the cup within her palm. Molten lead splashed over her fingers and shrapnel flew without damaging her skin. The metal dripped to the brass ground with a metallic clink. Ark looked at him for a moment, digesting Yuan's words before answering. I'm listening, she said. The longer Ark listened, the deeper her scowl grew. By the time Yuan finished his tale, she asked him to draw a sketch of Manhattan's chest symbol. He did so by grabbing a bullet and using it to shape a pile of gunpowder with it. That's the nuclear path symbol, all right, Ark said with a grunt. Those atom smashers love it to death. Wished I would never see it again. As Yuan feared. Any idea what this cube of Natho could be? I don't know anything about a cube. Ark's jaw tightened, her teeth clicking like a rifle ready to shoot. I've heard of Natho though. 'Twas a lost-age military alliance that ruled the West, till the Skybiter ate half their nations. They fielded weapons that could destroy entire cities during their heyday. You think the cube could be one of them? Probably. Ark's scowl darkened even further. You don't know nuclear path cultivators like I do. Every last one of them has a fetish for death and destruction. Nihility beckons wherever they go. Yuan studied her for a moment. They killed you the first time, didn't they? She didn't bother answering him. Yuan wasn't certain how to react to this information. The idea of a nuclear path cultivator getting his claws on a lost-age weapon disturbed him as much as it flew above his head. He had stepped into a situation way above his pay grade. Nonetheless, the information did give Ark more pause than anything else. She sat by her workbench for a moment while thoughtfully stroking her chin. Could it be related to Zarzoa? She mumbled to herself. High-level cultivators don't grow on trees, a disciple maybe. Yuan could sense her studying him, even without her having eyes to see. He kept his mouth shut. His gut told him she was pondering a very important decision. Okay, Ark finally said, with a single finger raised. Okay, I'll train you on one condition. Yuan tried to contain his excitement. A cultivator of this woman's caliber wouldn't share her knowledge without exacting a hefty price. And that is. You must form an unspeakable vow with me, Ark declared. Yuan could almost taste the venom in her next words. You will swear to destroy this Manhattan, any students he might have taken up, and do everything in your power to ruin his plans, whatever they are. Yuan immediately shot her proposition down. I'm nowhere near strong enough to pull that off. I wish I was, but that's beyond me for now. I'm not going to put a time limit in the oath. I don't care if it takes you years or decades to reach his level, just so long as you keep working to that end. Ark issued a warning. But if you pass over a reasonable opportunity to destroy that monster or abandon this goal, the oath will destroy your core. I won't budge on this. Yuan winced as he figured out the oath's full and deadly consequences. My bullet core keeps me alive. If breaking the unspeakable vow destroys it. Yeah, you'll die. Ark shrugged her shoulders. Those are my conditions. Take it or leave it. Yuan crossed his arms. His first instinct was to say no, then fuck no. Manhattan wasn't Slash. Yuan had no score to settle with him,
nor anything to gain from taking on such a dangerous and powerful cultivator, even with a generous time limit. The fact he would die should he fail to fulfill the contract only made it worse. However, this woman was a fifth coil Gunsoul. One of the greatest warriors of the unmade world, who fought a foe capable of wiping out cities on his own and beat him. Yuan knew many cultivators would have killed their own parents for an apprenticeship under such a prestigious teacher, not to mention that she followed the same path he did. What were the odds that he would find another Gunsoul of her caliber willing to teach him? Even Revolver had yet to cross the fifth coil. Unauthorized tail usage. If you spot this story on Amazon, report the violation. Yuan had to think this through carefully. It was literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You know I'll use those techniques you teach me to take revenge on my murderers, Yuan said. I thought you didn't want me to kill? Any graves you'll fill will be a fraction of the death that Manhattan will sow in his wake, and you wouldn't agree to a vow that prevented you from killing or defending yourself.
Ark snorted.
Don't take it the wrong way. If I could hunt down this Manhattan myself, I would. You're just a sniper's bullet that I'm firing at him.
Nothing more.
Yuan could live with that, but another part of the oath bothered him. What if I encounter a well-meaning nuclear path cultivator?
You won't, because they don't exist.
Nuclear path cultivators are like us Gunsouls, ghosts given a half-life by a curse greater than them, except their patron isn't satisfied with petty revenge and shootouts. Ark spat at the ground, her saliva turning into liquid gunpowder. To join the nuclear path is to become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Yuan squinted.
He thought the gun was one of a kind, yet here that woman suggested other demigods of violence haunted the unmade world? Whatever the case, she spoke with such loathing and confidence that he leaned on believing her. Manhattan clearly radiated malevolence and Zarzoa destroyed a whole city. Neither gave him a good impression of their chosen path. You'll teach me everything?
Yuan asked.
Even how to create an authority? Yes, she replied flatly. I can't guarantee you'll have the talent and discipline to pull it off, but I'll teach you the process to create your own authority. When she put it that way, Yuan couldn't imagine any sect elder agreeing to teach that secret to an outsider. He was years and many coils away from using an authority, but the mere promise of learning how to use one tempted him greatly. He had to check if she was trying to hoodwink him. I'll need access to your ammo stash too, Yuan said. I've signed a contract with the people waiting outside your authority. It's not an unspeakable vow, but a deal is a deal. You'll have to fulfill it by yourself, she replied, immediately shooting down the proposal. What I can do is teach you how to make your own bullets. Then you can solve the ammo shortage and shoulder the burden of responsibility, if you can carry it. She was putting her foot down on a few details, so she wasn't promising him the moon either. Her proposal was a serious one. If Yuan followed her teachings, gaining a chi pill to reach the third coil would be within his reach, / death too. Fine, Yuan decided after a moment's consideration. He would never receive another offer like this one. I accept your terms. Then put your hand on your bullet core. Yuan obeyed the order and waited. Ark waited a moment, then grabbed her cloak and unveiled her right arm. Yuan blinked in shock at what he saw. Ark's silver bullet core pulsated on her right breast, tendrils of lead sprouting out of it like a tree's roots. It had done more than weave itself into her flesh, it cannibalized it. A twisted mass of barrels and cylinders replaced her right shoulder and arm, with a sniper rifle sprouting out of what used to be her hand. She looked sick. I warned you to abandon the path of the gun, Ark said, her left hand touching her bullet core. You can still back down. Yuan hardened his resolve. He didn't care how he looked so long as he became strong enough to get his revenge. Humanity is overrated. Your loss, Ark muttered words under her breath, then uttered her oath out loud. I vow on my core to teach you everything I know, so long as you swear never to be a friend to the nuclear path cultivators. Swear to defeat this Manhattan, whatever his true name may be, and those who follow his path. Swear to oppose his plans whenever possible. Swear to destroy him, even if it takes you centuries. Do so, and I swear to make you my disciple. I swear to teach you all that I know about cultivation. I vow on my core to never be a friend to a nuclear path cultivator, Yuan repeated, though he slightly amended the rest of the oath. I will defeat Manhattan and those who follow his path once I wield the power to do so. I shall oppose their plans whenever possible or reasonable. I swear I will destroy him in time. He immediately sensed an invisible grip close on his bullet core. A force emanating from the Tao itself took heed of his words and fashioned a chain with them. A faint pressure began to weigh on his very soul, subtle and hardly noticeable. It remained with him after he completed his oath, ensuring he wouldn't forget his promise.
The unspeakable vow would follow him to its fulfillment. He couldn't back down anymore. "You're either a fool or quite determined," Ark commented as she covered her right arm with her cloak again. "Whatever. A vow is a vow, so I'll teach you everything I know." Yuan nodded sharply. "I am ready to learn." "Then show me your weapons." Yuan presented her with the Saint Heckler and the Kalash Angel. Ark snatched them out of his hands one after another, then put them on the nearby workbench with clear displeasure. "You've got the wrong mindset, the scrap mindset," she scolded him. "These firearms are tools, not power. They can help now and then, but if you start relying on them, then they'll become crutches you can't win without. You must first learn to rely on your own aptitude before you start supplementing them with weaponry." Yuan listened in dutiful silence, the same way he'd seen cultivator students shut up whenever their elders spoke. He suddenly noticed a tiny, yet very telling detail. Ark hadn't asked him his name. She didn't think he would survive long enough for her to bother learning it. He was a stray bullet shot in a random direction, with no expectation of hitting the correct target. Yuan was determined to prove her wrong. "Let's start with the basics," Ark said as she began their first lesson. "What do you know of the 3 pillars of cultivation?" An easy question. Yuan guessed she was checking on his general knowledge. Techniques, sutras, and feng shui. All of them come into 2 forms, innate and adaptive. Innate abilities are exclusive to a path because they require a specific soul or morphology to pull off. Adaptive abilities can be learned by everyone, but take different forms depending on the path and caster. "Wait," Yuan said, before catching his mistake. "Ugh. I won't kill you for asking questions," Ark said sharply. "I don't care for honorifics or protocol either. I'm not a sect elder." This reassured Yuan. He would rather ask what was on his mind than tiptoe around his teacher's pride. "I thought everyone could use any sutras." "That's a common misconception," Ark retorted. "A sutra draws power from the wayfinders, the Tao itself or other forces, so scraps can use them, yes, but it doesn't mean they'll let anybody play with their big toys. Some really powerful sutras will only trigger when used by the right person. Same with some feng shui rituals. The choice of location determines much, but some places will only answer to certain voices." Yuan pondered that information. It lined up with what Orient taught him about the Prithvi Mudra. Only earth-aligned cultivators could wield its full potential. "So, if I understand correctly." Yuan tightened his fist and turned it into steel. "Elemental infusion is an adaptive technique, while charging bullets with chi is an innate one." "No," Ark replied. "They're both adaptive techniques." Yuan blinked in genuine shock. He hadn't expected that answer. "I don't get it," Yuan confessed. "I've never seen anyone other than a gunsoul doing it." "Because most cultivators never bother to learn how to replicate the feat." Ark shrugged her shoulders. "The chi bullet trick originates from the gun path and its subpaths, true, but it's not exclusive to us. Only 3rd coil cultivators and beyond can learn innate abilities, because crossing the 4th coil involves engraving one in your body and soul to permanently dedicate yourself to a path." "Yeah, but I can charge bullets with chi because my body treat firearms as an extension of myself," Yuan argued. "Other cultivators can't do that." "Any path can charge a bullet with chi to generate special effects," Ark explained. "They just can't do it the same way we do. You can charge a bullet with chi because your path treats firearms like an extension of yourself. A metallist cultivator could shape metal from their iron body in the form of a bullet, charge it, and then fire it." "Ah, wait, I get it." Yuan snapped his fingers as he finally understood the concept. "The result is the same, but they use a roundabout method to reach it." "Yup," Ark confirmed. "Swimming is an adaptive technique in a way. Sure, a fish knows how to do it instinctively, but a human can learn how to do it with enough time and effort. You won't swim exactly like the fish, but you'll still swim. Adaptive abilities are general skills that must be adapted to a given path." Yuan pondered the implications for a moment. "I fought a Oni cultivator in a patch of Thunderlands who had crossed the 2nd coil, I think," he informed his new mentor. "He could generate mist and turn his body into a fog. You're saying I could create a gun path variant of his techniques?" "You catch on quickly," Ark confirmed. "The best cultivators are those adept at understanding the foundations of all cultivation arts, whether to incorporate them into their own path or to counter them. Always keep your eyes open. The fact that your enemies walk different roads from yours doesn't mean they have nothing to teach you." Ark opened her palm. Yuan watched intently with his chi sight as a small rifle bullet materialized between her fingers. To his surprise, his teacher didn't draw raw material from the authority around her,
the object simply appeared to materialize from raw metal chi energies. This is bullet materialization, his mentor said while playing with her new creation. Which category does it belong to? Yuan sensed it was a trick question of some sort. He briefly wondered if creating bullets was exclusive to gun souls before remembering the metalist example Ark gave him earlier.
It's an adaptive technique, he guessed.
You're half right, Ark replied, which was a fancy way to say Yuan messed up.
It's a feng shui spell. An adaptive one.
A case of content theft. This narrative is not rightfully on Amazon. If you spot it, report the violation.
Feng shui.
Yuan blinked as he registered that information. His experience with a discipline mostly involved manipulating ley lines or directions to improve the flow of qi, and thus his attacks. Orient did show the ability to restore objects within her confines to a previous state, but even she couldn't manifest objects out of thin air. Moreover, feng shui relied on exploiting a location rather than the user's qi. Ark drew the energies used to fashion that bullet from the world itself rather than herself.
How did she achieve this feat?
Item materialization is a sub-branch of the barrier class of feng shui spells, Ark explained. A barrier is a feng shui spell that excludes something from a set territory. The first cultivators called them Simabanda, Kekai, and forbid dances. I've encountered a few. The Stoneskin sect raised a few around their compounds to keep outsiders out of restricted areas. Yuan always pondered about their inner mechanics. The strength and range of a barrier is determined by three factors: what it excludes, its shape, and its caster's visualization. The more things a barrier repels, the more it shrinks.
Ark waved her hand.
Yuan saw the flow of qi around her reshape itself at her command in the shape of a small circle barely extending beyond her body. Darkness overwhelmed everything inside its confines until his mentor vanished from inside a cone of shadows.
Take light.
Light is made of many colors. Red, green, blue. The barrier suddenly doubled in radius. Ark appeared again, though Yuan immediately noticed that her red hair had turned black. A barrier that excludes red light will have a larger range than one that excludes light itself, because it keeps fewer things out. How do you separate red light from the rest? Yuan asked, his mind struggling to grasp the concept.
Light was light to him.
He hardly imagined how to fraction it. That ties into the visualization restriction, Ark replied. The better the barrier's creator understands what they exclude, the stronger its boundaries. Any cultivator can create a barrier that keeps demons out, but those who never encountered one in the flesh will have an incomplete understanding of what they're supposed to repel, making it easier for a real fiend to break through. Yuan nodded to himself. He had never studied light nor its physics. Since he didn't understand how it worked, he couldn't understand how to fraction it. His limited knowledge greatly reduced the number of things he could repel. Yuan understood bullets well enough though. He wondered if he could create a barrier that would repel them.
Observe closely, Ark ordered.
See how a boundary is breached. Yuan paid attention to her barrier and noticed how the ambient flow of qi battered against its outline like a river against a dam. It eventually pierced through, and the barrier collapsed into nothingness. Barriers are created when a cultivator temporarily reshapes the area's flow of qi, which then seeks to return to its original state, Ark explained. The more stable its shape, the longer it'll last. That's why most cultivators resort to using circles or octagons. Yet Yuan knew the Stoneskin sect's defenses lasted for years. He wondered how they achieved that until he hit upon a likely solution. Can you layer multiple barriers upon each other? Yes, Ark confirmed with a shrug. That'll only matter if you're trying to create a barrier that lasts for years on end though. Most rarely last longer than seconds or minutes in battle.
That checked out.
Yuan guessed that the Stoneskin sects used layered barriers to durably reroute the flow of qi around their compounds, the same way communities used networks of dams to reroute water and reduce its friction. Now, knowing all these details, Ark flipped the bullet within her hand. How did I create this? Yuan pondered her question for a moment. From what he observed earlier, Ark manipulated metal-aligned qi present in the environment to materialize the bullet. How did keeping things out of a perimeter achieve this? Unless he was thinking along the wrong lines. He thought only gunsouls could charge bullets with qi, but Ark insisted that other cultivators could imitate them with roundabout methods. What if bullet materialization involved a roundabout use of barriers? Can you reverse a barrier?
Yuan asked.
As in, keep something in rather than out? Pretty sharp, Ark confirmed his hypothesis with a nod. Yes, cleverly built barriers can be engineered to keep something inside them and create powerful seals. This Manhattan likely used this trick to mask their presence by containing his qi inside a small perimeter. Then I think, Yuan cleared his throat. He was no quick talker, so it took him a moment to find his words. I think you created a bullet-shaped reversed barrier that would keep metal-aligned chi within itself and repel everything else. That way you concentrated metal chi to such a degree that it took physical form. Like a mold. A barrier that would exclude everything except a specific element would both be small and extremely short-lived. The latter didn't matter much though. Once the metal chi condensed into a bullet, it would retain its shape even after the barrier that created it disappeared. For the first time since he met her, Ark gave Yuan a small, wry smile.
Not bad, not bad.
Rather impressive, actually.
Yeah, you guessed right.
I used one barrier to keep the metal chi in, another to keep everything else out, and then layered them together. It's easier said than done though. That was one way to put it. Layering those two forms would require extreme precision, and both barriers wouldn't last longer than an instant. The sheer degree of focus required boggled Yuan's mind. But now that he knew it was possible and how to achieve it, he couldn't wait to try it. Here's your first exercise, Ark said after placing her bullet on the workbench. I'll teach you how to create barriers. When sunset comes, you'll have to cultivate outside my authority for an entire night in the open. Yuan froze in place.
Outdoors. Ark nodded sharply.
You'll have to spend a night under the moonlight with your barriers as your only protection.
That's suicide.
Moonburns would kill him within the first hour of exposure. For the cowards and the weak-willed, sure.
Ark shrugged without concern.
Those who cannot survive the moonlight and face themselves will never stand among the greats. If you can't create a barrier that'll protect you from moonburns. Ark's lips stretched into a fearsome, predatory look. Well, then you'll have to create one to keep your moonlight demon in. Yuan returned to the spirit train in the late afternoon to find Holster and the others waiting for him. Bucket and his fellow cultists played dice with pellets near a rifle whose barrel was planted in the ground like a tree with a helmet over the stock. Yuan guessed they buried their late comrade there. As for Orient, she diligently stood on the spirit train's threshold since her nature as a caretaker prevented her from leaving its confines. I'm back, Yuan said gruffly, only for Holster to rush over and hug him the moment he stepped out of the headshot forge. It drew a smile from his face as he awkwardly patted her on the head.
And in one piece.
Praise the gunpowder father, thou have returned. Bucket's enthusiasm turned to confusion when he noticed the Saint Heckler and Kalash Angel's absence.
Weaponless.
They were confiscated, Yuan replied with a sigh. Ark wouldn't return them until he proved himself self-sufficient. I've met with the rifle woman. She won't let us harvest ammo from her domain, but she means us no harm and offered up an alternative solution to our shortage. Yuan recounted his encounter with Ark, much to the cultists' joy. The fact she didn't want them anywhere near her authority and accidentally killed one of them did little to diminish their enthusiasm. The mere fact that a powerful gunsoul rose from the dead and chose Yuan as an apprentice was a miracle in their eyes. To think that the rifle woman would make you her disciple, Bucket muttered, before mimicking shooting himself in the head with a finger gun, a gesture which the other cultists swiftly imitated. Holy bullet, we may finally see the rise of a true gun sect. It's just one-on-one mentoring, Yuan warned them. The idea of founding a sect didn't interest him in the slightest, let alone Ark. He preferred doing his own thing. She isn't going to move anywhere either. I must say that I never knew mortals could damage each other's soul, Orient said. The prospect seemed to worry her. Yuan guessed that a spirit like her was more in tune with those things than humans. Her duel with this Tsar Zoa must have been a legendary fight. Holster tugged at Yuan's pants to get his attention, then formed a series of hand signs. Yuan recognized the mudras she used, those associated with asking for help. Yuan guessed that she saw herself in Ark. Both suffered from a damaged core and its own consequences. One was free but powerless, the other strong but unable to properly control her own power. Yuan wasn't certain which of them had it worse. She doesn't think we can do anything to help her, Yuan replied. Did that Flesh Mansion sect disciple not say they could heal Miss Holster's core? Orient suggested. I concede a wounded gunsel's soul might work differently than a human pillar, but if one can be repaired, why not the other? Yuan shrugged in ignorance. He didn't know enough on the subject to answer. Part of him did ponder Orient's words though. It sounded like a waste for a warrior of Ark's caliber to waste away in a prison built from her own power, waiting for death. Yuan chased these wayward thoughts from his mind. Ark didn't ask for his help beyond killing Manhattan, and she had given him other tasks to complete. One which he would have to confront at sundown. Ark wants to put me through a test before she teaches me how to create bullets. I must spend an entire night exposed to the moonlight, with only barriers and sutras to defend myself with. Not that Yuan believed his gunplay would protect him in that situation.
Alone too.
It said something about the danger of moonburns that even the bullet church cultists, with Bucket's notable exception, briefly gave him looks reserved for fools and dead men. Holster's eyes widened in fear and she began to shake her head in panic. Even Orient shifted in place uncomfortably. With all due respect, honored guest Yuan, I strongly suggest against following this course of action, Orient declared with genuine concern. Moonburns strike by the will of the Black Moon, a wayfinder who has become one with the Tao. To repel it with only a barrier would be akin to trying to reverse up and down. This would be an act of divinity rivaling an authority. Bucket immediately defended Ark's assessment. If a holy gun soul said it can be done, then it should be. You're sure, Buck? One of the cultists asked, his fear written all over his face. Moonburns are no joke. Even cultivators hide from it. That rifle woman shot Benny dead too, and she didn't give us the ammo we asked for, another said with a grim scowl, his eyes wandering to his dead comrade's makeshift tomb. Maybe she's just crazy.
Nonsense. Bucket protested. This is a test of faith.
It is possible to survive a night under the moonlight, Orient conceded. But while I highly respect your abilities, honored guest Yuan, I do not think you will succeed. Not with your current skills at least. This is a trial by fire, Yuan explained.
Orient squinted at him.
What does this rifle woman believe you are guilty of?
It's a figure of speech.
Come to think of it, the only trial Yuan witnessed involved stoning rather than fire. He wondered where that saying came from. She's putting me through a tough challenge to see how I fare under pressure.
Too much pressure breaks even steel, Orient replied, unconvinced.
This one will break you. Yuan knew the risks all too well. He had seen victims of moonburns and buried a few. The lucky ones were those who simply went mad from the hallucinations. The worst of them either died or became monsters roaming the wasteland. Nonetheless, Bucket had a point. If someone of Ark's strength believed he could do it, then he would have to try. He couldn't see why Ark would give him an impossible task after going through the trouble of forming an unspeakable vow with him. The narrative has been stolen. If detected on Amazon, report the infringement. Yuan would never defeat Slash or Manhattan if he refused to leave his comfort zone. What do you know of moonburns, Orient?
Yuan asked.
As a caretaker spirit, she might offer him precious insight. The moonlight reveals the true shape of the soul, honored guest Yuan, Orient explained. Unlike spirits like myself, mortals do not understand themselves.
They doubt, ponder, and suppress.
They hide the truth of their heart with lies the same way muck obstructs a river. When the moonlight sets their delusions on fire, the weak burn with them, only the strongest of will emerges purer, reforged.
Reforged. Yuan frowned.
Reforged implied gaining greater strength, which confused him. He had never seen moonlight survivors coming out of the experience better than before. Moonburns can improve you. For a precious few, yes, Orient conceded. Cultivation is as much the art of reinforcing the mind as it is the body. The doubts and falsehoods mortals accumulate in their heart from emotional debris slow down their cheese flow. It blinds their soul and limits their potential. So I could improve my cycling and chi reserves by burning such debris away, Yuan muttered as he stroked his chin. He didn't think he had any particular emotional hang-ups to deal with, but he could simply lack awareness of them. Gaining a better understanding of my soul will likely come with other benefits too. Ark hinted as much when she sent Yuan on his way after teaching him the basics of barrier shaping. To know the shape of one's soul is to know oneself. Conquering the moonlight will let you see through the veil of the mind and catch a glimpse of your true path. Her words had confused Yuan more than anything. I thought all gun souls followed the path of the gun. We all follow the same line of fire, true, but its target is ours alone to choose. Yuan recalled that Ark had smiled back then, though she refused to tell him why. He guessed some truths could only be experienced, not told. Orient scowled upon seeing the interest in his eyes. I must insist once again that you reconsider, honored guest Yuan. In my humble opinion, the strength you may receive from surviving the moonburns isn't worth the risk. Holster too silently begged him not to proceed with Ark's test. Her hands were tightly joined in a prayer and her wide eyes betrayed her concern for her guardian. It pained Yuan to set his foot down to her of all people, but he remained resolute. I must try anyway, Yuan insisted. You are kind both of you, but Ark won't teach me anything unless I pass this trial, and I will succeed.
Orient scowled at him.
And what if you do not? Yuan's jaw clenched in frustration. He could tell that she worried more about what would happen to Holster and her should he perish. Orient was a living train, meant to guide people to their destinations. He had been the one to guide her so far. Without him, she would have no purpose. As for Holster, she had nowhere to go. Yuan knew Orient would take care of her to the best of her abilities, but her human pillar nature would forever prevent her from living a normal life. She would have to stay on the run fearing capture by slavers or worse for as long as she lived. As tough as it sounded, and as much as he appreciated Holster and wished the best for her, burying Slash in a ditch remained Yuan's top priority. He would need more power to pull it off, and he was ready to risk his half-life for it. He wouldn't be able to face Mingxia and Jialong in the nowhere if he chickened out, and he had already sworn an unspeakable vow. No way he would back down now when revenge was within his grasp. I won't fail, Yuan insisted. No one would bury him again. You'll have to trust me on this one. Holster stared at him in silence with her big wide eyes, before meekly nodding. Yuan could tell that she remained worried about him, but she chose to believe in him. She had seen him defeat a radhag with nearly all of his bones broken after all. Orient studied Holster and Yuan, then accepted defeat. Very well, she said. I shall try to help however I can, honored guest Yuan. Thank you. Yuan took a long deep breath. I swear I won't disappoint you. Failure wasn't an option tonight. Yuan sat in a lotus position outside the spirit train. The Fleshmancer's white flowers surrounded him from all sides, forming a soft bed under him. Holster, Orient, Bucket, and the others observed him from the panoramic car's window a few meters away. Yuan had to promise them that they could try dragging him back inside if it seemed that he would die from moonburning to get them off his back, though it came out more as an empty reassurance. Was this how Jialong felt whenever he and Mingxia prevented him from stupidly endangering himself? A mix of appreciation for his allies' concern and frustration at their lack of trust? Unlike Jialong, Yuan did prepare himself for this excursion. He'd spent the afternoon laboriously drawing symbols and circles in the ground around himself with Holster's help to improve the flow of earthly qi. He sat at the center of a vast bagua array with a radius of 4 meters on each side. Barriers were a form of feng shui, and thus grounded in the world itself. As such, geometric shapes drawn around the caster helped them take physical form. Arc could will barriers into existence with a wave of their hand, but a simple circle would help a neophyte like Yuan focus more easily. His first attempts showed Yuan that barriers required very little qi from himself. He mostly expended a little at the start to gently guide the ambient flow around him in the shape he desired, at which point it achieved stability on its own. If he had to compare barriers with techniques like the recoil fist, the former was akin to shaping a wall from clay within his grasp, while the latter forced him to use his own flesh as the foundation. The real effort came from the visualization aspect. Yuan didn't understand moonlight, so he had no idea what he was supposed to do to keep it out. Would repelling light itself spare him from getting moonburnt? Or did the moon's rays simply carry the magical power, like how lightning coursed through water? He couldn't tell until he actually experienced it, at which point he would have to quickly adapt the barrier to improve its resilience. The current one only blocked his idea of the moonlight. It likely wouldn't survive first contact with the real thing. Holster showed a much better, nearly instinctual affinity for the visualization aspect of barriers. She helped Yuan draw trigrams of 3 lines, either broken or unbroken, around the central yin-yang circle on which he sat. From what he gathered, this specific configuration would not only reinforce the outer octagonal barrier, but also help him recreate it quicker should it fall. And then there was the matter of this moonlight demon, which Ark mentioned. Yuan knew that some moonburn victims transformed into fiends, but he had no idea how the process worked. Would a monster emerge from his heart if he succumbed to the hallucinations? Orient couldn't tell him, and Ark didn't wish to. He would know soon enough. The sun was about to set. Yuan gathered his breath and then began to cycle. His barrier, weak as it was, let qi enter it easily enough. Focusing on its flow helped take his mind away from the incoming danger. Yuan basked in the freshness of the night around him. The light of stars and the world's outer rings was faint, almost imperceptible in the dark. The sun vanished behind the horizon, leaving the waxing moon alone in the night sky. For a very brief moment, the world seemed to hang on by a thread around Yuan. He sensed a shift in the ambient flow of qi like the needle of a clock stopping between midnight and the next day, between one universal state and another. Crossing the veil and entering the Thunderlands had been brutal. This transition, meanwhile, was as subtle and natural as the turn of the seasons. A force more pervasive than gravity took hold of reality itself. Yuan looked up at the waxing crescent moon, a black orb with a sliver of light peeking out, and it watched back at him like a squinting silver eye surrounded by a scare of stars. The gaze of a wayfinder who had become one with the Tao, with existence itself. The black moon was seeing him, knowing him, judging him. The moon's radiance crashed on Yuan's barrier and shredded it like paper. A mighty wave of energy coming from the sky blew his poorly built defenses away and struck him in an instant. The moon's rays were as cold as the sunlight was warm. It was like he was being buffeted by winter's winds, except their chill ate away at his chi circulatory system rather than his flesh. His breath didn't turn to mist when it escaped his lungs, but a sensation of frost and numbness coursed through the roots of Yuan's bullet core nonetheless. A great power subtler than the one coursing through the Thunderlands touched him, raw and alien. The moonlight caressed his soul. Yuan immediately created a new barrier. Experiencing the moonlight firsthand sharpened his understanding of it, so he attempted to keep it out with better boundaries. An octagonal protection arose from his bagua perimeter and held strong for a few seconds. Then it collapsed like the first. Yuan clenched his teeth as he furiously tried to figure out a solution. Moonlight used to be reflected sunlight in the days before the Black Moon's ascension. That was only half true now. When Yuan adjusted a barrier meant to repel the sun's rays, which he understood well enough, the moon's radiance continued to touch him. A stranger force changed it into something his mind struggled to understand.
What if Yuan blocked light? All forms of light?
He had seen Arc pull it off, and though her barrier shrank, it still managed to cover her. Yuan closed his eyes and focused on the flow of chi around him to better reshape it. He first tried to cover the entire bagua array, since he trusted Holster's trigrams to help improve its solidity, but he failed to sustain the barrier. The defensive perimeter collapsed before he could even complete it. As expected, a barrier that excluded something so pervasive and all-encompassing as light possessed both a narrow range and weak defenses. His next attempt only covered the yin-yang circle at the array's center. Yuan reshaped the flow of chi rising from the nearby ley line along its edges. The barrier held this time. Yuan immediately sensed the coldness receding. A circular space barely wide enough for his body to fit in protected and enveloped him in a shroud of thick darkness. When Yuan opened his eyes again, the universe had grown black. Yet the moon continued to glare down at him. Yuan realized he had failed, to his utter incomprehension. Light was what allowed the eye to see.
No moonlight, no moon.
Yet its eye remained visible above him, shining in a pitch-black expanse of thick darkness. "How cute," a familiar voice said on his left. "You think trash like you can keep the Tao out?" Yuan's head snapped to the side, his eyes catching a glimpse of a man peeking through the barrier. His fanged mask stretched into a malevolent grin while its horns shed blood. His golden eyes peered at Yuan with the same cruel expression he bore before putting him in the ground. Slash. Yuan's bullet core began to pound in his skull so hard it hurt. The sight of his murderer grinning at him, his head so close that Yuan could feel his rancid breath on his face, filled him with panic and confusion. Yuan instinctively shifted position, his foot flying at Slash's face faster than a bullet. His nemesis easily dodged the blow with a laugh. Yuan's inattention caused the barrier around him to collapse into nothingness. The moonlight and starlight bathed him once more in their radiance, their rays barreling on his skin. Yuan rose to his feet and immediately adopted a fighting stance, his attention entirely focused on his enemy. How did Slash get there without him noticing? The masked man stretched his legs in front of him without a care in the world on the bagua trigrams. If the moon burns affected him, he didn't show it. Creating a barrier to keep the black moon out is like saying you'll create one to keep quarks out, you witless trash, Slash mocked him. The Wayfinders are part of the Tao. They are everywhere. Something is wrong. All of Yuan's senses told him that Slash stood in front of him. He could smell him for the Wayfinder's sake, and his bullet core pounded madly in his head, but he trusted his gut. His presence here doesn't make sense. Yuan's eyes wandered to the spirit train. Its windows had grown so black he couldn't see the people inside, but Slash stood in the vehicle's path. It would have been child's play for Orient to run him over.
Why didn't she then?
Because he's not there, Yuan realized, a chill traveling down his spine. Slash had no reason to be there right now, and Yuan's allies would have intervened if he were. Orient and Holster would have sent a warning had Yuan's enemies sneaked up on him. He's not real. Yuan was already hallucinating. Support the author by searching for the original publication of this novel.
Impossible.
Everyone knew that moonburns came from direct exposure to moonlight. Closed windows alone were enough to block out the effect. What did Yuan's previous barrier lack that glass did not? Was a mere glimpse of the moonlight enough to trigger the process? Yuan quickly excluded that option. People caught in the moonlight could hope to save themselves by taking shelter inside. Only prolonged exposure caused moonburns. If blocking the moonlight didn't suffice, then what would? "You know, I'm following the path of the dyad," Slash's illusion mumbled to himself. A katana appeared in his hands, its blade shining in the moonlight. The dividing and the duality. The study of light and darkness, the separation between the self and the other. Master and servant, challenger and challenged, good and evil.
Ignore him, Yuan told himself. This false slash was a ploy, an illusion meant to distract him from the real danger. Can't waste any time. Yuan looked up at the moon's eye. It studied him with such rapturous focus that Yuan finally caught on to his barrier's issue. Wayfinders had become one with the Tao and imposed their heart's desire upon it. The Black Moon's rule was simple: everyone exposed to the moon's gaze would have their inner truths revealed. Yuan's barrier managed to reject light itself, but the moonlight wasn't a vector through which the Black Moon's power traveled, it was one of its manifestations. A symptom of its attention. It wasn't the moonlight Yuan had to hide from, but the moon's gaze. He had to create a barrier that repelled its very concept and blocked the Black Moon's sight. But how was he supposed to do that? Rivalries and divisions empower me in a way you can't fathom yet. Slash swung its false blade above Yuan's head too fast for his eyes to follow. Yuan felt its edge caress his hair. The illusion was vividly realistic. It's why I go around picking fights, because my self defines itself in opposition to others. Shut up, Yuan ordered as he focused on the moon. He needed to understand it if he hoped to survive the next few hours. You're a hallucination. Not real. You're sure about that, Trash? Slash smirked ear to ear, his katana whistling as it moved. Can hallucinations do this? He struck Yuan in the chest, his blade impaling him from one side and sticking out of the other. Yuan gasped in shock and surprise. The pain was intense, sharp, and above all real. He sensed a metal edge cut through the bullet roots coursing through his veins, followed by a surge of fire erupting within his flesh. Smoking red blisters formed around his wound. Burns. Moon burns. See? The illusion taunted Yuan before viciously twisting the blade in the wound. I'm real enough to kill you. Yuan grabbed the sword with his hands in an attempt to remove it. His hands burned at the metal's contact, though he managed to force it out of his chest a little. The blade had weight and texture. The moonburns made it real. Slash held his katana with both hands, then lifted Yuan up with it. Yuan's thought process came to an abrupt halt as his feet dangled up in the air. Slash hurled him across the bagua array before he could react. Yuan landed face first on a bed of petals and dirt, utterly shocked. You're seriously deranged, Trash, the fake Slash taunted him. You'll throw your half-life away because some senile has been told you so? Yuan gritted his teeth and focused on the flow of earthly chi. His senses told him that he had indeed landed outside the bagua array. I moved. I actually moved. Either Slash's illusion could throw him around like ragdoll, or Yuan's mind was so far gone already that it compelled his body to shift position on its own. This is bad. If this illusion could wound Yuan, then it could kill him. Yuan rushed to his feet, his mind furiously trying to figure out a way out of this situation. His mentor's instructions echoed in his mind. If Ark ordered him to complete the trial using only feng shui and sutras, then he either didn't need techniques to prevail, or they wouldn't do anything to help. I can't kill someone who doesn't exist, Yuan realized. Slash lazily walked up to him with smug confidence. Either I find a way to block the moonburns or he'll finish me off at his leisure. Yuan began to cycle the lunar chi around him, embracing the moonlight and basking in its energies. He understood the risks, but he couldn't create an effective barrier against something he didn't understand. The lunar chi was quite different from the one surging from the earth, cold, evanescent, and difficult to grasp. Yuan felt like a man trying to shape an icy mist. Are you ignoring me right now? That's quite insulting. Slash shook his head with a look of absolute condescension. I guess I'll have to shorten your half-life then. He lunged at Yuan in a fearsome blur of speed, his blade aiming to kill. Yuan's reflexes barely let him step back to avoid a fatal blow. The illusory sword sliced across his chest with inhuman speed and cut all the way to the ribs. Fire seared Yuan's flesh, his teeth gritting to suppress the pain. Slash would have cut him in half had he been a second slower. Is the pain really worth it? The illusion taunted him. Isn't it enough that you survived getting shot in the head once and came back with powers? The fake Slash immediately continued his assault, his katana singing as its steel cut through the air. Yuan was forced on the defensive. He sidestepped and dodged, his enemy's blade coming within an inch of slicing his throat more than once. The danger ahead of him moved too fast for him to focus on the ambient chi. Normal people in your situation don't hunt down their murderers across the wasteland begging for a second round of gun roulette, Slash taunted him in between swings. They're too busy celebrating being alive. Yuan gritted his teeth and backflipped in a vain attempt to put some distance between the mirage and himself. It did him little good. The false Slash closed the gap between them in an instant, his blade grazing the surface of Yuan's stomach. The truth is, you're sick in the head, scrap Trash.
You're a deviant who gets off on the idea of killing cultivators. Another swing of his sword left a trail of burns across Yuan's chest. Murdering that Oni, Toshiro was it? I'm sure blasting his head off gave you a boner bigger than my katana. You killed Jialong and Mingxia, Yuan rasped angrily. If he denied the hallucination, maybe he could break its hold on his mind. Can't let you get away with it. Come on, you don't care about Jialong and Mingxia. One of them was an idiot and the other a whore. They were just scraps, both of them. Yuan's hands clenched into fists. Shut up. If you'd cared about either of them, Slash cackled cruelly. They would be the ones showing up instead of me. The illusion's words jolted Yuan worse than the Radhag's lightning. They were lies, he knew it, but somehow they managed to latch onto his soul. His hesitation was rewarded with another blow deadlier than the others. Slash's katana impaled him through the heart in a flash of fire. Pain, followed by a sensation of boiling alive, filled Yuan's chest. The tip of Slash's katana stuck out of his back. The rest of the blade sliced through his heart and spread moonburns across his chest. If Yuan still needed organs to survive instead of a bullet core, then he would have died on the spot. His agony wouldn't be so swift. You don't really care about your old teammates, Slash taunted him. You never allowed yourself to. The hallucination tried to lift Yuan up by his katana and gut him open like a fish. Yuan grabbed the blade with his hands before he could do so, his hands burning at the steel's contact. You kept them at arm's length because you were both pathetic weaklings, the hallucination said. Scraps whose lives I snuffed out in an instant. That's bullshit. Yuan hissed back while blisters covered his fingers. They were my friends. Right, you were so close that you replaced them with a train and an orphan a week later. Slash pushed back in an attempt to bury his sword into his enemy's flesh. Look into your memories. What do you know of their dreams? Their hopes? Nothing. Yuan grit his teeth. His mind tried to come up with a clever retort and came up empty. He knew that Jialong wanted to become a cultivator. He and Yuan both worked together in hope of eventually buying a pill, and that Mingxia set money aside for something, but he couldn't recall why or for what. Did he ever truly know his teammates? Yuan banished these questions from his mind before they could distract him from the battle at hand. He managed to force the sword out of his flesh inch by inch, but the pain grew sharper anyway. His body ached worse than ever before. He felt sick on the inside. You're not pursuing me to avenge Jialong and Mingxia. You're chasing me to avenge your wounded ego. Slash leaned forward to whisper into Yuan's ear. Do you think killing me will prove that you've risen above scraphood? You talk too much, Yuan replied angrily. He headbutted the hallucination with all of his might. The blow hurt him worse than the fake slash, but it pushed him back enough for Yuan to fully extract the blade. He kicked the illusion in the chest and forced him back. Slash easily adjusted his posture and shifted into a battle stance. Ready to fight back now? Sort of. Yuan gathered his breath and then joined his fingers except for his pinkies. Mahamayuri. The Madra's name echoed across the night and caused the fake slash to flinch. Encouraged by his reaction, Yuan frantically repeated the incantation as if his life depended on it, because it probably did. Mahamayuri. Yuan repeated. The pain of the burns lessened with each utterance, the smoke dying out and the blisters growing cold. Mahamayuri. Mahamayuri. Slash's body wavered and blurred like a mirage in the sun. His golden eyes flickered into two quicksilver moons glaring at Yuan, while his sword undulated like rippling water. The Mahamayuri Madra cleansed the user of poison and toxins. From the illusion's reaction, that included mental ones. The moon was losing its hold on Yuan's mind. It's working. Yuan continued to utter the Madra while grounding his feet into the ground and focusing on the lunar chi. I can dispel the hallucinations. You think you can keep me out with a Madra? Slash exploded into a deep, maniacal laughter. I'm inside your head, dumbass. Maham, Yuan gulped as a surge of pain suddenly overwhelmed his chest. A viscous liquid erupted from his wounded lungs and forced its way up his throat. Mayu. Yuan covered his mouth with his hand and suddenly collapsed to his knees. His bullet core pounded so hard his skull hurt. His throat burned with smoke rising from his nostrils. Something was clawing its way out of him. Something big, vile, primal. You feel it, eh? Slash's laugh echoed inside Yuan's head to the tune of his core's pulsations. Everything you hate about yourself coalescing? All your lies, your fears, your anguishes, your worst self trying to escape your hollow shell. I can hold it. Yuan forced his mouth shut and covered his nostrils in an attempt to keep the thing inside him. It only increased the pressure within and without. The weight of the moon's gaze grew stronger. It called out to whatever lurked inside Yuan and beckoned it to come out. It came from his soul. His soul. I get it now. The path to victory became clear to Yuan. I finally get it. Yuan hastily drew a small circle in the ground around himself, using the last of his strength. He called upon the flow of the earth's chi to rise around him, and a barrier formed in answer to his plea by surrounding him from all sides. The pain vanished in an instant. The moonburns didn't disappear, but Yuan briefly grew numb to them. The viscous liquid filling his lungs receded. Whatever horror threatened to erupt from his flesh crawled back into his bowels. Slash looked at the circle with disdain. What's that supposed to keep out?
Yuan coughed. Myself.
Slash glared at him, then attempted to bring his sword down on Yuan's head. The steel harmlessly bounced off the barrier without inflicting any damage. The illusion's expression twisted into a snarl of rage, its furious assaults clashing again with an impenetrable defense. His attacks were waves crashing on an eternal shore. Yuan watched the pitiful display with morose acceptance. Part of him wished he had guessed wrong. The danger of moonburns didn't lie in the light, but what it revealed. You're part of me, aren't you? Yuan asked the hallucination.
My what doubts?
My moonlight demon. Slash growled in response. He punched and kicked at the barrier, his blows unable to shake its boundaries. Yuan glared back at the apparition in frustration. How could this thing arise from his own mind? If you discover this narrative on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen. Please report the violation. How was he supposed to conquer it? Would he have to maintain the barrier until dawn? In that case, it would simply be a matter of waiting. A surge of pain arose from Yuan's chest, distracting him. His hand reached for his burning skin and again felt the steam rising from the wounds. The liquid thing wriggled back in his stomach and reasserted itself.
It's not over.
Yuan realized to his horror.
He quickly formed a mudra.
Mahamayuri. Come out, you coward.
Slash taunted him.
Are you going to hole up until the stars die out in the sky? Shut up, Yuan growled back, only for a sensation of nausea to overwhelm him. The mudras didn't do anything to quell his pain this time. What was happening? The barrier kept Slash out, but not the moonburns? You would have lived your life to the fullest if you'd cared about your dead teammates, 'cause that's what they would have wanted for you, Slash mocked him. They would have wanted you to raise that orphan girl in peace, but we both know you won't. You'd cast her aside to face me, after all.
Lies.
Yuan snapped back, only for his chest pain to worsen. The moonburns affecting his wounded heart had spread all the way to his shoulders. Yuan felt his body bursting at the seams as boiling liquid tried to force its way up his throat. Yuan always wondered how moonburn victims turned into monsters, and he had the very bad feeling he would experience the process firsthand very soon. He couldn't hold the thing inside him for long.
Calm down, calm down.
Yuan forced himself to breathe and focus. There has to be a solution. I stopped the moonburns before, so I was on the right path.
What changed?
Rise up, coward, Slash taunted him while kicking the barrier. Ripples spread through its foundations. Would it crack soon? Go on, tell me I'm wrong. Yuan would have an easier time focusing without this hallucination blurting out lies and... Yuan's eyes widened in understanding. He stared at the hallucination. Now that he looked at Slash, he seemed to have grown a tiny bit taller since Yuan raised his barrier. His previously blurry appearance had sharpened. He had regained his power over Yuan's mind.
And he had an idea how.
The more I deny you, Yuan glared at Slash. The stronger you get. The hallucination smirked ear to ear, his fangs gleaming in the pale moonlight. The pain in Yuan's chest lessened a tiny bit. I don't care about them as much as I should? Yuan muttered under his breath. That's what you're trying to say? You don't want to kill me for them, the illusion replied cruelly. You're doing it for you.
Just for you.
Yuan almost answered that a man wouldn't work so hard to avenge people he didn't care for, but he stopped himself. Denying the hallucination's taunts only strengthened the moonburns. Instead, Yuan forced himself to sit down, breathe, and think. Was there any truth to his words? Yuan had cared for Mingxia and Jialong as much as someone like him could afford to in their line of work.
He was certain of it.
But did I care enough to track down their killer across the wastes like I do now? Yuan pondered. He tried to imagine what would have changed if Slash's band had ambushed him alone. His answer was nothing. I would have pursued him anyway. Yuan pursued Slash to avenge himself first and foremost, because he wanted to prove his strength. To show the world that he had risen above his status of scrap and could fight back against those who killed him so casually. Avenging his teammates was just an excuse to assuage his conscience, a way to tell himself he had nobler intentions than the power-hungry cultivators he despised. Yuan glanced at the spirit train and its blackened windows. He wondered if Holster and the others were staring back at him from behind the glass. How did this whole encounter look to them? Did they hold their breath while he let a manifestation of his own subconscious mind torture him in the hopes of grasping more power? Yuan wasn't the kind of person to put his guns away, even for the sake of the innocent. He wouldn't stop even after killing Slash. He knew that now. He would keep looking for opponents to defeat and mountains to climb. He wanted to grow so strong that nobody would bury him in a ditch ever again. Is that all I am? Just another power-hungry cultivator? Yuan glared at his heart's reflection outside the barrier. A Slash with guns? Yuan searched for the answer deep inside himself. Seeing the ugliest parts of his soul physically manifested in front of him didn't give him too much leeway to deny the truth, but he felt that he was missing an important detail. Would he have bothered to carry Holster around and look for a cure for her if he only cared about proving his strength? He might have killed her previous owners for the sake of his pride, but a heartless cultivator obsessed with strength would have surrendered her to the rad hag or sacrificed her for his own purposes. Instead, Yuan let her tag along with him and sought to protect her. He hated what Holster represented, a dog-eat-dog world where sex could turn children into living sacrifices and kill whoever they wanted. That was why Yuan wanted to ascend through the coils of infinity, to spit on that rotten wasteland that treated scraps as nothing but slaves and resources. No wonder Bucket's plan to screw over both of Fleshmarket's sex appealed to him so much. Yuan would wipe them out himself if he had the strength to do so, alongside Manhattan, the Inyong Khan, and other cultivators who killed others without blinking. I hate those assholes, Yuan told himself, figuratively and literally. I want to kill them all. It suddenly occurred to Yuan that his hallucination hadn't spoken in a while. He focused back on Slash to find him gone. A monster stood in his place. The creature in front of Yuan was as fearsome as it was otherworldly, a fiendish entity rising from Ginsmoke, with a loaded gun's barrel and slide protruding from its ghoulish metal face. Its eyes burned with a fierce fiery light, and a bright glow shone between its jagged fangs. Its body was an amalgam of flayed flesh and steel, with iron skulls forming most of its chest. A blazing cannon seamlessly merged with its right arm and a Gatling gun with its left. Only its armored legs were sleek and vaguely humanoid. Most would have felt fear at the sight of this demon, but Yuan found it comforting. Familiar even. He knew what this creature was the moment he laid eyes upon it, his soul's true shape, revealed to him by the Black Moon's will. Bullet hell. The words escaped Yuan's mouth on their own, clear and unmistakable. The monster vanished in the blink of an eye upon hearing them. It simply disappeared without a trace, never to return. Bullet hell, Yuan whispered under his breath. Where does that come from? From within, a melodious voice answered him. Yuan looked up at the moon. A young woman gracefully drifted down from the night sky above, her intricate umbrella spinning under the stars. Yuan thought he was dreaming for a moment. The ethereal figure hovering above him carried herself with otherworldly grace, her long-sleeved black gown flowing in the night's wind. Her pale skin was a striking shade of blue and her long curly hair the color of quicksilver. Two curved horns peeked out from under a wide-brimmed hat. Her crimson cat-like eyes studied Yuan's bullet core with amusement, while her lips stretched into a spirited smile. You received a glimpse of the path your soul wishes to take, said the stranger. The truth previously hidden by your fears and doubts. Who are you? Yuan asked. Though he sensed no hostility from her, he still kept his guard up. My name is Kagaya, a messenger of the Moonlight Sect. The Black Moon's hidden worshippers. My sincere congratulations on braving the first of our Lord's trials, Gunsoul. The first. Yuan squinted. There are more. Of course. To conquer oneself is a long and perilous journey. Facing one's doubts is only the first step towards enlightenment. The woman chuckled lightly. But rejoice, for few are brave enough to take it. It's a meager consolation, Yuan replied with a snort. I failed my mentor's trial. I was supposed to block out moonburns with a barrier, and I failed. The woman smiled kindly at him as she landed on the ground outside the barrier, her umbrella closing. Your master is either ignorant or a trickster, she said. No power short of an authority can obscure our Lord's gaze. Such a task was doomed from the start. Yuan pondered her words for a moment. Though he knew her sect had an interest in overstating their patron's power and influence, she sounded sincere enough. Yuan's barriers failed to keep the Black Moon's influence out too, he only managed to triumph over himself, not the Wayfinder. I wouldn't have tried if I knew, Yuan guessed. By making him think he could block out the moonburns with a correct barrier, Ark forced him to quickly focus on mastering the art and challenge his inner demons. A likely possibility, Kaguya confirmed. The path revealed to you is but one of many open to you. Your success tonight grants you entry among the Moonlight sect. Allow me to invite you among our numbers, if you wish to understand yourself through secrets and reflection. I'll pass, Yuan replied instantly, politely yet firmly. His answer drew a laugh from her. Why is that? Yuan gazed at the moon. It just occurred to me that I hate sects. Thankfully, Kaguya took Yuan's rejection in stride. It is a shame that you would deny us, she said. I assure you that we are not like most sects and their rigid traditions. We Moonlighters are more of a collective of scholars dedicated to the understanding of ourselves. All sects say that, Yuan replied with skepticism. He had heard too many empty promises to buy this one. Stoneskin, Flesh Mansion, Metallists, beneath the veneer, you all serve the same shit. While hierarchies are inherent to any kind of organization, ours is loose, Kaguya replied, though Yuan didn't believe her. Nonetheless, my invitation does not come with a time limit. Venture forth and walk your own path, if that is your wish. Should you change your mind one night, you only need to pray for the Black Moon's mercy and I shall answer in its stead. Yuan shrugged. As far as recruitment speeches went, he had heard better. I don't think we'll meet again. The Moon Cultivator gave him a wry smile. I am not so certain, Yuan Guang. He bristled. How do you know my name? The moonlight unveils everything, she replied. Our Lord is a wayfinder and a kinder guide than the gun. We would be happy to free you from the Gunsoul curse and give you your half-life back. This core is the seat of my soul, Yuan replied with a snort. I'll die without it. You would, Kaguya conceded. But there are other forces that can fill that void. So long as you do not cross the fourth coil and dedicate yourself to a path, the gun will not be your only option. Yuan squinted at her with suspicion. What do you know of Gunsouls? Enough to pity your kind. Kaguya disappeared behind her umbrella. Ponder this when you find yourself at the barrel's end. She vanished in a blink of an eye, leaving Yuan alone in the pale moonlight. He was tempted to brush off Kaguya's words as the empty boasts of a cultivator seeking to impress a potential recruit, but she also called being a Gunsoul a curse, just like Ark before her. The Moonlight sect focused on gathering secrets, so they might know more about the gun than he thought. Yuan shook his head and sat back into a lotus position. He had no intention of joining a sect or straying from the path of the gun so far. He was fine bearing a curse's burden if it meant gaining the power to stand on his own two legs, independent from sects and warlords alike. Ark ordered that he spend the night cycling while raising a barrier to stop the moonburns, and while the latter exercise was apparently impossible, he was determined to complete the former task. Yuan noticed an improvement the moment he closed his eyes and absorbed the local chi into himself. He breathed in the cold moonlight and invited the starlight into himself. The once disturbing experience had become soothing, almost enjoyable. The lunar energies moved through his metal veins faster than ever before, and the night no longer felt hostile to him. Orient was right, purifying himself of emotional debris had eased his chi's circulation. Yuan could feel it move seamlessly inside him, without obstruction or speed bumps. His burns and wounds didn't impair him. Taking a step towards enlightenment had given Yuan a greater sense of self-awareness. By gaining a glimpse of his soul and understanding its own shape, the divide between his sense of individuality and the rest of the universe had become starker. Seeing the outline of a piece let him see how it differed from the whole. The Tao was everything and everywhere at once, but Yuan was more than a cog in a machine. He knew where he stopped and the cosmos began. The lunar chi only helped to illustrate that frontier by shining on him. Ark told him that she created bullets by using two overlapping barriers, one to draw in the chi required to forge them, and another to exclude everything else. Yuan realized that he had an easier time with the latter after surviving the moonburns. Moreover, his soul was encased in a bullet core. He understood its composition on an instinctual level, the same way a man knew his own hands. Can I do it? Yuan wondered before experimenting with barriers. He focused on the chi around him, trying to understand how everything fit together. Metal overcomes wood, like fire triumphs over metal. Yuan was taught that the 5 elements were metaphorical. They represented a state of chi energy rather than actual fire or water. Nonetheless, techniques like elemental infusion taught him that this metaphor could easily become reality. The author's tale has been misappropriated. Report any instances of this story on Amazon. The more things a barrier excluded, the smaller its radius and the more difficult it became to maintain. Yuan created one that repelled everything except metal-aligned chi. He sensed the world change at his command as the building blocks of reality rearranged themselves. It took a few tries, but the result of his labor soon materialized within the palm of his hand, a bullet raw and pure.
Strange.
Why would Ark tell him to use two overlapping barriers when one that excluded everything except metal chi could do the job? Yuan studied his creation and quickly noticed the issue.
A bullet
Was easy enough to build, since it was nothing more than a piece of metal. A functional cartridge was a different matter altogether. He needed a casing to hold the gunpowder required to propel it, and a primer to help ignite it. In its current state, his creation was no more than a lump of lead unfit for a gun. Yuan would have to segment his barrier to materialize its individual components. The casing and bullet would be easy to make, since they were both made of metal chi he could easily produce himself. The gunpowder and primer would prove more difficult to obtain. Charcoal, sulfur, saltpeter, Yuan thought as he recalled the primary ingredients for basic gunpowder. He had spent his life learning about guns and researching its components after all.
fulminate primer.
Yuan knew how to identify these elements, since they made up a part of his soul, but they differed too much from mere metal for him to summon them from nothing. He put a hand against the earth and analyzed the flow of chi. To a scrap, the region around him would look like a useless expanse of white flowers blooming over a desolate wasteland, but the Fleshmancer's creations still required water, however rare, to bloom. They'd sucked the ground of it and left only precious minerals. Yuan detected those deposits sleeping beneath the earth, from the remains of ancient trees to sulfur and lead. Ark didn't choose this ley line to stabilize her broken authority for nothing. If ammo could naturally grow from the earth, they would find these fields quite nutritious. Yuan never imagined himself as a farmer, but he supposed being a cultivator wasn't so far off from one. Both exploited the environment to nourish themselves. Yuan pressed his palm against the ground and designed overlapping barriers. His first 3 tries ended in abject failures, either because he failed to segment them properly or because he couldn't isolate the elements he wanted. The fourth, though, resulted in a strange fruit, a conical piece of metal 9 millimeters in diameter and filled with explosive powder.
A cartridge. Neat, Yuan said.
By sunrise, Yuan finished his cycling surrounded by bullet piles. He'd spent hour after hour refining his cartridges, from his crude first attempts to good quality projectiles that looked indistinguishable from handmade ammunition. These seem good, though I'll need a gun to test them, Yuan thought, right before a strange idea crossed his mind.
Do I?
Yuan grabbed one of his own cartridges between his thumb and index finger, faced the horizon, and then triggered his recoil fist. The pulse successfully ignited the projectile and sent it flying across the land with the familiar sound of a gunshot. Yuan smiled in pride. Combining item materialization and the recoil fist consumed far more energy than using normal firearms, but he wouldn't need to rely on them.
Ark would be pleased.
His moonburns had healed too, though not in the way Yuan would have expected. His charred skin had turned into a thin metallic sheen where the fake slash had inflicted damage. A network of intertwined iron coils occupied the space where his old human heart used to be. Revolver warned him that he shouldn't expect to look human if he progressed further on the path of the gun. Yuan understood what he meant by that now. His bullet core was slowly changing his body into a shape that better fit his gunpowder-fueled soul. Yuan could live with that outcome. Facing his fears and doubts had only hardened his resolve. He would do whatever it took to crush Slash and his kind. Yuan grabbed a few of his cartridges at the exact moment the door to the spirit train's panoramic wagon opened up. Holster immediately rushed out of it to hug him tightly, with the cultist stepping down after her. "Holy bullet," Bucket said in adoration, his hands forming a rifle sign as he greeted Yuan. "The moon itself recoils from the gunfather's chosen." "Told you I would succeed," Yuan said, mostly for Holster's sake than that of the cultists. "You made us wonder, honored guest Yuan," Orient said. The caretaker spirit stood on the wagon's threshold, her eyes studying Yuan's healed wounds. Watching moonburns overtake you was quite the disturbing display.
Yuan scowled.
"How did it look on your end?" "Frightening," Orient replied bluntly. "You began to argue with a person who wasn't there, then ran outside your own barrier while burns consumed your flesh. We were steadily growing concern for your safety, doubly so when that woman came down from the sky. Had she attacked you, I would have had no choice but to intervene."
"The woman?"
Yuan clenched his fists. "You mean the girl with the umbrella?"
"Indeed," Orient confirmed.
"I must say, I do not understand what artifice she used to disguise her presence and leave without leaving a trail. I suspect the use of an innate technique." So the Slash hallucination took place in his own head, but Kagaya was entirely real. Yuan wasn't sure what to make of that information. The fact the Moonlight sect could instantly intercept anyone surviving their moonburns and escape without a trace disturbed him greatly. At least he fulfilled Ark's trial and came out stronger. His improved cycling, greater insight into barriers, and newfound mastery of item materialization were more than worth the pain he went through. Bucket proved all too eager to test Yuan's creations too. He grabbed one of the 9mm bullets, put it in a handgun, and fired at the horizon. The gunshot echoed across the landscape, and the smoke rising from the barrel had never smelt sweeter to Yuan. "These can fly, sir,"
Bucket said.
"Would the bullet church have ammo schematics I could use?"
Yuan asked. "Of course."
Bucket clapped his hands in his giddiness. 9mm, 10mm, as many millimeters as you need. "In that case, I'll solve your ammo shortage all by myself," Yuan replied with no small amount of pride while patting Holster on the head. "Let's fill one of the wagons to the brim with an ammo harvest." He would give Flesh Market's sex a taste of bullet hell. Like last time, Yuan found Ark crafting bullets in Headshot Forge's heart. He couldn't help but wonder if she did anything else in her spare time. "You should have accepted her offer," she told him without turning to face him. "You'll come to regret your decision." Yuan crossed his arms. "How much did you see?"
"Everything."
Ark studied her latest bullet. "The Moonlight sect visited me too once, when I first survived the moonburns. I regret denying them today."
"But you still did," Yuan replied. "Why?"
"Same reason as you, I suppose. I was a naive fool who wanted to stand on my own 2 feet." She shook her head in bitterness and tossed the bullet aside. "For all the good it did. You made your choice, and so did I. I'll see this through to the end." "Stubborn one, aren't you?" She turned to face him, a wry smile on her face. "You performed well for a newbie, I'll give you that." At least she seemed pleased with his progress. Yuan took it as a good sign, though he had some issues with her training methods. "You deceived me. No barrier could repel the moonburns." "I asked you to cultivate under the moon for a full night and you did," Ark replied. "I'm no helicopter mentor."
"Helicopter?"
Was that some kind of spirit beast? "I don't know that expression." "It means I'm not going to coddle you. You wanted to learn my techniques, so I'll teach them my way." She raised her index finger at Yuan. "You've shown good instincts by combining item materialization and the recoil fist, but you've also missed a key application of barriers." Yuan watched with attention as his mentor crafted a tiny, cylindrical barrier extending from her nail and beyond, one crafted to repel air itself. It surrounded Ark's finger and extended to 3 times its length. It reminded him of a rifle's barrel, with his mentor's hand serving as the handle. In short, it looked like a finger gun. "Barriers always require some form of physical anchor, a support on which to stand," Ark explained. "Your body is as good as any. You've seen that when you began crafting bullets of your own. A cylinder is a stable shape with many applications. You're creating an artificial barrel to increase range and velocity while reducing friction," Yuan guessed. Ark confirmed his assumption with a nod. "I call it sniper's bore. You create a tube extending from your finger that focuses the recoil fist's energy and stabilizes the bullet's trajectory. This drastically sharpens your precision, if your eyes can keep up with the target." To illustrate her point, Ark grabbed a bullet and jammed it inside her finger gun's barrier. The projectile floated in front of her nail. Not only was the cylinder designed to repel air from the sides, but also kept the bullet contained within itself. Ark then pointed at the sun and activated her recoil fist. Unlike Yuan, she had enough precise control over her technique to avoid using her entire hand. A burst of energy surged from her finger alone, igniting the bullet's primer. The charged shot flew faster than Yuan's eyes could follow with a supersonic boom. He managed to trace a flash of its chi trail as it crossed the entire length of Headshot Forge and beyond. "What was your longest shot?" Yuan asked as his mentor's barrier dissipated. "Around 500 kilometers, Ark replied flatly. "You're kidding." Yuan stared at her in disbelief. It took him a while for his mind to grasp the sheer distance. "That's the length of the Fanged Coast. There's no way you could see a target at that range." "Believe what you want," Ark replied with a shrug. "It wasn't a good shot anyway. The bullet's impact loses its punch and velocity at such a distance. 3 to 10 kilometers is your optimal range for sniper's bore. You'll get diminishing returns beyond that, not to mention that you won't keep up with your current eyes. You'll need more coils under your belt to punch above your range weight." Yuan pondered her words in contemplative silence. His longest shot ever was at 1.5 kilometers with an iron sight and little obstruction. So many parameters determine a shooter's success at a distance, from the wind to air friction and the target's movements. He could see himself doing better with an actual sniper's scope, but not with naked eyes. I'm still thinking like a scrap. If Yuan could reinforce his body with qi, he should be able to sharpen his vision. Madras will help me too. Yuan began to practice sniper's bore under Ark's watch. Creating the barrier came easily to him, since it was designed to keep bullets and the recoil fist's shockwave penned in, both of which he understood on an instinctual level. It only took him a few tries to create a stable cylinder around his nail and lengthen it until it matched a rifle's barrel.
Now comes the hard part, Ark warned.
The recoil fist usually expands from your entire hand. You have to keep it limited to your finger. Do I focus its power?
Yuan asked.
This text was taken from Royal Road. Help the author by reading the original version there.
No, you must divide it.
The recoil fist's energy travels from your bullet core along its roots all the way to your palm. Tune the output to a minimum. Too much power will destroy your own projectile otherwise. Yuan never tried this, since he never needed to. He pointed his loaded finger gun at the sun and looked into himself. Passing the moonburn trial enhanced his chi awareness enough that he could see the exact pathway connecting his bullet core to his phalanges. He focused on one alone, then mentally the chi allocated to the technique before firing it. A faint pulse of power erupted from his core, traveled the length of his arm, then reached his index finger. The recoil fist's energies ignited the bullet's primer while remaining contained within the cylinder barrier. It flowed forward like a wave, pushing the projectile ahead at immense speed. His bullet flew across the length of his mentor's authority in the blink of an eye. Yuan had succeeded on his first try.
Good so far, Ark said.
You've got a natural affinity for these techniques. I've used guns for so long, they feel like an extension of myself. It shows, his mentor replied, albeit without any fondness. Can you think of another use for that barrier? Yuan thought it over before finding one. He formed another barrier cylinder, albeit one that encircled his entire hand instead of his finger alone. The increased radius would prevent him from firing bullets, but he had no intention of using one. Instead, he crafted the barrier to fully contain his recoil fist's shockwave so it wouldn't disperse. Let's see if I can blow them out. Yuan pointed his enclosed palm at the gunsmoke clouds hanging over the headshot forge.
1, 2, 3.
Unlike with sniper's bore, Yuan didn't reduce his output and used the same amount of power he usually afforded to a normal recoil fist. His chi poured out of his core along the length of his arm and finally exploded into a shockwave when it reached the palm.
Yuan flew.
A powerful blast of air erupted from Yuan's palm in a mighty supersonic boom. The cylinder barrier canalized the pulse into a focused shockwave of compressed air. It blew a hole into the gunsmoke cloud in an instant. But it worked a bit too well. While the barrier held the blast as it was designed to, the backlash proved terrible. The recoil traveled back along the length of Yuan's arm and threw him backward. It was like firing a cannon with his bare hands without ground support. He ended up crashing against Ark's workbench at full speed, the shock sending discarded bullets falling to the ground. It always happens to us the first time, clever boy, Ark teased him. She seemed more amused by his fall than anything.
That's the recoil blast.
It covers a smaller area than the recoil fist and it has a much smaller range than sniper's bore, but as you can see, it packs a mean punch. Yeah, the recoil part lived up to its name.
Yuan grit his teeth.
His entire arm felt sore from the wrist down even after his cylinder barrier disappeared. He might have shattered his bones had he overdone that shot. I'm still beholden to momentum's laws. No dispersion means I take the full blowback. You'll need setup before you can use that technique, Ark warned him as she offered him her hand. You have all the tools you need already to fine-tune it. By forming a barrier at my back to avoid falling? Yuan asked as his mentor helped lift him up. Or by optimizing the cylinder?
She shrugged.
You're smart, figure it out. Yuan was starting to see a pattern there. I've noticed something, he said. So far, you've encouraged me to figure out techniques on my own, rather than simply tell me how to practice them.
Ark sneered.
Cultivators who don't experiment and push their limits are doomed to perish. Few of them learn how to learn.
Learn how to learn?
Yuan never considered that approach. What little he had seen of sect training involved endless drills, spars and lessons. Follow orders, climb the ranks, never question, always obey. Ark's approach appealed to him more than the Stoneskin sect's lessons ever did. You've proven you can handle yourself, so I'll return your weapons to you. Ark tossed him back both the Saint Heckler and Kalash Angel. You'll have to figure out what they can do in the field. I may have to test them soon, Yuan replied. I've got some cargo to deliver back to Flesh Market.
I've seen that.
Ark didn't bother to hide her distaste. You understand these bullets you've crafted will kill innocent people too, right? I do, Yuan conceded, though he felt neither shame nor guilt. If you could observe my moon trial from so far away, then you've seen the people I'm traveling with. One of them is a human pillar, a Haito-Bashara. Ark's expression darkened slightly.
I've seen.
The Flesh Mansion sect robbed her of her freedom, and would have taken her life had I not intervened. The Metallists are barely any better. I'm sick of these people getting away with everything. If they want to kill each other so badly, I'll oblige.
So that's your plan?
Sell ammo to both sides and hope they wipe out each other.
Ark scowled.
You would have been better served infiltrating one of the sides and destroying it from within, or strategically taking out a few important figures like dominoes. That would minimize casualties.
Too late for that, Yuan replied.
The situation in Flesh Market is a powder keg. The sect war can start any time, and everyone with sense has likely evacuated already. This ammo run is the best I can do right in the current circumstances. So you'll just plant seeds and hope they bloom the right way?
Yeah.
Yuan spat at the ground. I know many bystanders will die, but the more the sects kill each other, the more it'll weaken their grip on the region. Maybe some good will come out of it one day. Spoken like a true son of the gun.
Ark snorted.
And that's not a compliment. What would you have me do then? Nothing, Ark replied with fatalism. Even if your half-assed plan works, another sect will just fill the void and the cycle will begin all over again. You can try to purge them off the unmade world all you want. They'll come crawling back like cockroaches, as they always do. Yuan knew it was a possibility. Flesh Market's choice location and vital infrastructure would make it a tempting target for warlords and power-hungry cultivators seeking to control the Fanged Coast's trade. He couldn't guarantee that he would succeed in eliminating the sects in power there, let alone that someone worse wouldn't take over. But Yuan never rolled a die expecting to know the result. Hope for the best, expect the worst. Maybe this is gonna sound stupid, Yuan said. But if you don't try to change things, then they never will, no? Ark responded with a long, heavy moment of silence, and then a word of warning. There are no winners when powerful cultivators fight, only survivors. Yuan could live with that. He wanted both sides to lose.
I'll be back soon, Yuan promised.
Return to me with a chi pill or not at all, Ark warned him sternly. Those lessons were just to pick you up to speed. You'll need to cross the third coil before I teach you the real stuff. She knew how to motivate him at least. I've seen the shape of my soul, he said.
Bullet hell.
The Moonlight Cultivator said it was the path my soul wished to take. There are paths within paths, Ark replied. I've told you that the gun branches out into many roads. The one you've seen is but one of many. What's yours then?
Can't you tell?
Ark returned to her bullet forging.
Sniper.
Are you sure, Orient? Yuan asked as he readied the Kalash Angel. It might blow a hole in your walls for all we know. The front wagon was empty save for the two of them, and of course the captive Sentaded Orient caught and nailed to a metal panel to use as a target. The creature bitterly snapped its mandibles at its captors in vain. I will be fine, honored guest Yuan, Orient reassured him. While I respect your abilities, I doubt any of your weapons can truly damage me beyond my ability to repair myself. You may fire at will. Although Orient struggled to express human emotions, Yuan did notice the satisfied smile at the edge of her lips. She was looking forward to him blasting the Sentaded apart. Considering how they had infested the spirit train once and the radhag that spawned her, he guessed that she took no small amount of satisfaction in their demise. She's becoming more human by the day, Yuan thought as he aimed at the Sentaded with the Kalash Angel. She's already holding grudges. Now that he could create ammunition at will, Yuan was willing to spare a few rounds for testing. The baggage wagon now housed tens of thousands of ammunition as valuable cargo. Various types of cartridges designed with the Bullet Church's schematics slept inside luggage chests in the treasure car, which was more than enough to resupply everyone with a gun in Flesh Market. Bucket had been right in the end. Once Yuan figured out the trick, he only had to sit down to harvest bullets from the ground. His item materialization skill was only limited by the flow of ambient chi and the Earth's resources. He produced an output of a dozen cartridges a minute once he set his mind to it. Selling ammunition might prove more lucrative than any courier work. Yuan aimed at the Sentaded with the Kalash Angel and fired a volley. His chi coursed through his weapon the moment he pressed the trigger and shot 4 rounds in total. One hit the creature straight in the head and blew it to pieces. The others vanished through the metal panel. Yuan blinked in surprise as his rounds simply disappeared into the steel. They produced no impact and left no traces. Did the rounds merge with the plating? He asked Orient. They went through it, Orient clarified after examining the scene. The Centidede's blood on the floor hardly seemed to bother her. And through the walls beyond it too. They phased through solid objects. Yuan asked with a frown. Like ghosts. This would be my theory. Orient studied the Centidede's wounds. The bullet that killed it remained squarely lodged in its flesh. Since your projectiles hit this vermin, I suspect that they ignore inorganic matter. Yuan couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. We used armor-piercing rounds, and now we have armor-ignoring rounds. That wordplay sounded way better in his head, but it delighted Orient nonetheless.
Indeed, she replied.
I hope this will prove helpful in your battles to come. Yuan could see a few ways to make use of this peculiar property. While few cultivators used armor and chi-charged gun bullets could usually pierce through their defenses anyway, targeting an enemy through walls might let him land surprise attacks. Yuan decided to test the Saint Heckler next when the wagon's door opened. Holster walked through it with a big bright smile, a paper sheet in one hand and a revolver in another. She happily walked up to Yuan with a beaming smile while ignoring the dead Centidede in the room.
What is it, Holster? Yuan asked.
His charge proudly offered him the revolver, which he studied more closely. Besides sutra scripts carved along its barrel and cylinder, it looked completely ordinary. This is for me? Have you finally completed it, Miss Holster? Orient asked Holster with what could pass for motherly pride. It looks very pretty. Yuan recognized tiny scratches along the gun. Wait, he said in disbelief, his mind putting two and two together. This is my revolver. The one I blew up fighting the Radhag. Holster nodded proudly, which led Orient to smile ear to ear. This is the gift I mentioned earlier. Miss Holster used feng shui and sutras to restore it to its previous condition. Yuan had faced cultivators in battle without fear, yet he found himself stammering. He remained unused to kindness. I don't know what to say, Holster, except thank you, I guess. Yuan wasn't a sentimental person, but this gun held a special place in his heart. It had been a gift from Revolver after he rose from the ditch/put him in, and the first firearm he received as a gunsole. In a way, it represented his first step in the world of cultivators. Holster beamed with happiness, which only served to embarrass Yuan further and amuse Orient. He had no idea how to deal with gifts and gratitude, so he settled on patting Holster on the head very gently. His charge blushed slightly and then pointed to the scripts carved on its steel. Yuan studied them carefully and then channeled chi through the weapon. As he suspected, the revolver's sutras resonated with his power as it coursed through the metal. His power usually spread equally across the entire gun, but it instead split 6 ways in each of the chambers this time. This novel's true home is a different platform. Support the author by finding it there. Yuan sensed his chi change the bullets within them. His power altered the loaded projectiles in 5 subtly different forms. The first gained the texture of thick, furiously festering bark. The second became hot, filled with the warm frenzy of a wildfire. The third adopted the texture of strong ancient stone. The fourth melded with sorrowful metal, and the fifth became moist like water and cold like fearful ice. Only the 6th chamber behaved normally, with his chi remaining in its natural, formless state once it infused the bullet within. Are these the 5 elements? Yuan asked as he stopped channeling his chi through the revolver. The bullets immediately returned to normal afterward. Holster modified the revolver to alter his chi elemental affinity once it entered a chamber. That's impressive. I'm sure it will come in handy. Holster nodded proudly and then presented him with her handwritten sheet of paper next. The combination of diagrams and sutra scripts scribbled on it gave Yuan a headache, so Holster vaguely explained its meaning with a series of mudras and hand signs. This will help the rifle, girl. Yuan translated. You mean arc? Holster nodded sharply. It pleased Yuan that he was getting better at understanding her, but he failed to grasp the sutra script's significance. Orient kindly translated its contents for him. Miss Holster is a human pillar, she reminded him. Her kind was first created to strengthen and stabilize an area's feng shui. Miss Holster believes she could serve a similar purpose on behalf of Miss Ark. Yuan clenched his jaw at Holster. We aren't burying you alive inside Ark's authority. Holster shook her head reassuringly, then mimicked walking with a limp. A crutch. Yuan translated. From what I read, Miss Holster thinks she could use sutra scripts to bind herself to your honored mentor's bullet core and serve as its living anchor, Orient explained. Miss Holster would have to remain in Miss Ark's close vicinity at all times, but she wouldn't need to sacrifice her life. Yuan frowned in skepticism. He didn't think the idea hadn't crossed Ark's mind at some point, or if she did consider it, she might have refused it on principle. It can't be that easy. Miss Holster's idea is highly theoretical, Orient conceded, much to the poor girl's chagrin. The process would be fraught with failures, and likely suppress most of Miss Ark's chi. I cannot foretell the consequences yet. You do understand that even if it works, you may spend the rest of your life tending to that woman? Yuan asked Holster. Her deal is with me alone. You don't owe her anything. Holster chewed her lip, yet remained resolute. She nodded at Yuan, though he remained unsure whether she truly fathomed the consequences of her choice. In her mind, she had a chance to help someone in a similar situation to her own. That was enough for Holster to give away part of her life. She had a good heart, but Yuan couldn't tell whether that was a good or bad thing in this world. You'll have to ask Ark herself, Yuan warned Holster. He hoped, nay he knew, that his mentor would dissuade her. She seemed to have made peace with her fate and eventual death. Orient's back suddenly straightened up, her eyes burning with light. Her reaction troubled Yuan, for she had reacted the same way when she identified the ammo bog as an authority. Trouble on the road? He asked. I see flesh market, Orient replied with a scowl. And plumes of smoke rising in the sky from the city. Yuan's bullet core pounded in his skull. He rushed to the nearest window, opened it, and took a peek at the world beyond. Dust blew in his face along with the smell of charred meat. True to Orient's word, Flesh Market rose in the distance with clouds of smoke floating above its ancient buildings. Its walls had changed since Yuan's last visit. Roots of festering flesh spread on its stones while green screens on metal frames grew on its steel like electronic flowers. Yuan immediately recognized the latter as a Screen City's extension. The Metalist sect must have found a way to spread their Wayfinders broadcast. If so, then the organic tissue was probably a Flesh Mansion sect bioweapon of some kind. The party had started without them. Not too long ago though, Yuan would have expected a lot more fires otherwise, and the city walls, while compromised in some areas, remained mostly intact. This complicated matters. If Yuan led a sect, then one of his priorities would be to raid the Bullet Church's armory for weapons. No point in giving them space and respecting their neutrality now that hostilities started. They would get caught in the crossfire if they headed there. Then again, it could also play into Yuan's hands. Considering the Metalists had a gunsoul eager to ascend through the third coil in their ranks and who was familiar with the Bullet Church, then this Gatling man would likely lead the charge. That would offer Yuan a chance to grab his bullet core. The door to the wagon opened again, with Bucket and his fellow cultists rushing in. From their panicked eyes and expressions, those that Yuan could see at least, they had seen the smoke. Sir. This is terrible. Terrible. Bucket seemed well and truly at a loss. Flesh Market is burning. This is a disaster. I am sorry, Yuan replied. He guessed that for all of its awfulness, Flesh Market remained their home. It's awful. Awful. Bucket held his helmet in his hands and maniacally shook his head. A legendary gunfight has started, and we're missing it. On second thought, Yuan should have expected something like this. One of the cultists did surprise him by kneeling at his feet in prayer. Sir Gunsoul, please take us back. The man begged. My family lives in the city. They're already dead. One of his more rational colleagues complained. It's a miracle we dodged that bullet, and you want to jump back into it. It's a goddamn sect war. They'll level half of Flesh Market by the time the dust settles. I say we cut our losses and move on. Bucket answered his cowardice with accusations. Blank, he shouted while pointing a finger at the dissenter. Blank, blank, blank. What do we do, honored guest Yuan? Orient asked him with a slight frown. Do I turn back, or do we drive on? Yuan considered his options. He had given Bucket his word he would take the cultists back to Flesh Market, and while he owed the city nothing, he wouldn't mind taking a few scrap families away from cultivator battles. Besides, the opportunity to grab a pill or bullet core was too good to pass on. Can you circle the city from the east? He asked Orient. I can. You wish to approach the Bullet Church from that side? Yes. Yuan glanced at Bucket. Will your allies attack us if we close in from that direction? Of course not, sir. Bucket searched under his cloak and drew out a flare gun. The smoke of truth shall warn them that the faithful bullets have returned to their chambers. Then we'll enter the city from the east. Yuan glanced at Holster next, who stared back at him with apprehension. You stay on board with Orient. Whatever you do, avoid looking at the screens and don't touch them, ever. Otherwise, they'll pull into a place you'll never escape from. Understood. Holster nodded quietly. Truthfully, she looked more concerned for Yuan than for herself, and she was probably right to think that. This would be a hard-fought day. Yuan and the gun cultists stood atop the spirit train as it closed in on Flesh Market. Distant booms and the echoes of gunfire grew stronger the more they approached the city, as did the smell of blood and death. The corroded metal wall protecting Eastern Flesh Market trembled under the searing crimson sky. Its strategically placed gun turrets had mostly turned inwards, its technicians firing at foes within the city rather than at the wasteland's many dangers. Scrap gunmen fought back against humans with cybernetic enhancements and robots with screens for heads trying to storm their defenses from inside Flesh Market. The Metallists had made their move. They had sent forces to seize the Bullet Church's weaponry for themselves, as Yuan suspected. Yuan came prepared. Boiled Centided plates covered his chest, arms, and legs. The Kalash Angel was strapped to his back, the revolver holstered to his belt, while the Saint Heckler waited in his hands. He expected an assault soon. The spirit train would make too tempting a target for the attackers to ignore. "Here goes nothing, sir." Bucket pointed his flare gun at the sky and pulled the trigger. A bright pyrotechnic projectile erupted from the barrel, flew upward in the sky, and exploded in a bright red cloud. "The faithful shall recognize their own." "As will our enemies," Yuan replied. A set of metal gates at the bottom of the fortified walls slowly began to open to allow the spirit train through. "Load your irons, boys. They're coming." It hardly took a minute for a welcoming committee to intercept them. A group of metallists storming the walls leaped into the void and flew towards the spirit train. Yuan counted half a dozen cyborgs wearing softly glowing helmets and talon-shaped thrusters for shoes. Their most striking feature were the rotary blades attached to their right hands. They spun at blinding speed with a low hum fast enough to allow them to fly. The soldiers' left hands, meanwhile, instead carried weapons from shotguns to submachine guns. Their equipment varied from well-maintained to shoddy scavenged parts strapped together. They didn't fly alone either. A set of compact, head-sized mechanical drones followed them closely. Their rugged shape sported a central green screen, plenty of rotors to keep them afloat, and a small nail gun between sets of tiny metal legs. Yuan loved moving targets. "Fire at will," he shouted to his allies. Yuan charged his Saint Heckler's bullets with chi and opened fire at the cyborgs first. His projectiles shattered a soldier's rotary blade, bounced off it, and then hit the user through their visor. The poor bastard went crashing down onto the ground below. Bucket shouted some nonsensical gun sermon as he and his fellow cultists followed Yuan's example. The cyborgs fired back with their long-range rifles and shotguns while the drones moved closer to the ground in an attempt to avoid the hailfire. The two groups exchanged fire from across a wide distance, the gulf between them quickly shrinking the closer the spirit train approached the walls. While the cultists weren't bad shots by any means, Yuan did most of the heavy lifting. His range was greater, his gunplay better, and his bullets more effective. He shot two drones, his projectiles bounced off them, hitting the nearest flying cyborg squarely in the chest, and then veering off again in the distance. It seemed that chi-charged submachine gun bullets ricocheted after hitting their targets. Situationally useful, but quite disappointing at the moment. Yuan would trade that ability for greater firepower anytime. The group had downed half the drones, but the survivors managed to reach their wagon. A 5-machine-strong squadron flew across the spirit train's length and fired nails at them wantonly. Yuan activated his elemental infusion to coat his skin in steel and easily stop the projectiles, but his allies proved less fortunate. One of the cultists took nails to the face and Bucket a nail volley in his helmet. The former collapsed on the ground bleeding and screaming, his face skewered with steel, while the latter's armor spared him an early grave once again. "Stay behind me," Yuan ordered his allies. Using his body as a shield to protect them, he raised a hand at the incoming drones and activated his recoil fist. The shockwave blew the drones to pieces, their scrapped remains falling off the spirit train. Only 2 cyborgs remained. They closed onto the train while Yuan's allies surrounded their wounded comrade. Yuan raised his Saint Heckler to down them both when he heard a distant shot. This text was taken from Royal Road. Help the author by reading the original version there. A shining bullet pulverized the 2 cyborgs in an instant. Yuan's enhanced cultivator senses picked up a bullet piercing them one after the other, but no normal bullet would blast off 2 men's torsos in a row. Their aimless rotary blades caused their remains to crash onto the spirit train windows and facade, their oily blood and cybernetic limbs falling off. "Sir, look!" Bucket shouted in happy zeal. "A metal angel!" Yuan glanced at the source of the bullet. A cloud of dust arose over the horizon as a familiar vehicle caught up to the spirit train at phenomenal speed. A cruiser with blazing wheels rode across the wastes, its skull-headed rider firing in the air to announce his arrival. Yuan's bullet core pounded in his skull when he recognized his savior. "Revolver. Yuan." Revolver cackled to himself and drove his cruiser alongside the spirit train, right beneath Yuan's wagon. His vehicle roared like a rampaging demon, its wheels blazing bright.
It's been a while.
Is this spirit train yours?
Yep.
Yuan replied while Bucket fell to his knees in prayer. The presence of two gun souls in close vicinity was too much for his heart to bear. What are you doing here? Came to wreck slavers and raise some hell, but I found the party started early.
Revolver replied. Of course he would hunt near Flesh Market.
Yuan recalled he wanted to storm the city when they first met.
You. Same.
Yuan reloaded his Saint Heckler.
Wanna team up? Attaboy.
Revolver's chuckle rang louder than gunfire. I'm here to cross Elder Polio's name off my kill list, but I don't mind filling a few more graves. A mighty blast erupted over the eastern wall. Yuan looked at it to see a pillar of smoke rise over it and one of its mounted cannons falling off it. His enhanced senses detected a powerful source of chi hiding within the fumes, the signs of a powerful cultivator, with an aura of fire and steel. Yuan had a good idea of who it belonged to, and the projectiles surging from the smoke only confirmed his hypothesis. A volley of chi-charged rockets aimed for the spirit train. Revolver, quicker on the draw, opened fire at them first. Yuan followed his example, their bullets flying to intercept the projectiles. They managed to hit a few and detonated them in midair in blinding flashes of fire and light, but missed two of them. One landed in the wasteland and left a small crater in its wake, the other hit the passenger wagon in a cataclysmic blast. The roof exploded, shrapnel and glass shards flying everywhere, while the entire spirit train shook along its length. Yuan suppressed a sigh of relief. Holster was hidden in the engine room with Orient, and the projectile had missed the luggage wagon. Both his allies and cargo were safe for now. Can I ask you to escort the spirit train inside Flesh Market?
Yuan asked Revolver.
We're going to evacuate civilians if we can.
Sure. Revolver replied.
How about you storm the walls while I stay on the ground? My motorcycle can't exactly fly.
That's the plan, Yuan replied.
He knew exactly who awaited him atop the wall, and that he had to face that foe on his own. He thanked Revolver before giving Bucket a tap on the back. Help Orient repair the damage and take all the non-combatants you can find on board the spirit train.
Yes, sir.
Bucket gave him a salute. What about you, sir?
I won't be long.
Yuan stretched his legs and then leaped off the train. The recoil fist's energy coursed through elementally infused steel flesh and burst from his feet. His shoes shattered into pieces while the blast propelled him upward. Having crossed the second coil and overcome the moonburns eliminated the terrible backslash that wounded him whenever he used this technique in the past, allowing him to use it multiple times in a row.
And thus Yuan flew.
He jumped across the air, riding the recoil shockwaves of his own ability again and again. His first bound sent him 10 meters into the air with a supersonic boom, the second lifted him around 2/3 the wall's height, and the third let him leap over it. He landed atop the meters-thick fortifications with such force that the steel beneath him cracked under his weight. It felt so good to be strong. Yuan observed his surroundings. He had landed right above the open gates, which the spirit train had started crossing already. A long platform of steel sprawled out from both sides of him, although thick smoke rising from a destroyed mounted cannon partly obscured his vision on his right. The smell of spent ammunition hung in the air while shattered concrete debris, dismembered scrap corpses, and destroyed Borgs lay all around him. The bullet church defended the spot to the last man and failed anyway. Their killer awaited Yuan, a lone mech surrounded by dead men. The steel behemoth in front of Yuan was about twice his size, a cyborg colossus encased in beige metal plates. He would have mistaken the man for a machine, if not for his partially exposed organic head. Only the upper part of his skull was still at least made of bone, the jaw replaced with tubes and cables likely connecting the brain to the body's mainframe. His pale gray, silicon eyes peered at Yuan with a predator's focus. The Borg packed quite the arsenal too. His broad, reinforced shoulders boasted a set of mounted rocket launchers and other cannon weapons that Yuan didn't recognize. His enormous hands firmly gripped a massive Gatling gun longer than an adult man. His armor bore inch-deep scars and scorched burn marks that did little to reduce his aura of overwhelming strength.
This guy was a tough one.
Gatling man, I presume?
Yuan asked.
It's good you showed up on your own gunsole, the cyborg answered, his voice twisted by a vocal modulator. He raised his trademark Gatling at Yuan with a single hand. I was gonna hunt you down anyway. Same, Yuan replied coldly. He raised his submachine gun at the cyborg and prepared to fire, only for both duelists to freeze in place. They'd both sensed it. That oppressive, malevolent aura approaching them. Fancy meeting you here, boys. A man in tattered clothes stepped out of the plume of smoke, his hand dragging a bisected cyborg's torso across the wall. He let go of his prize, stretched his neck, and then adopted a fighting stance.
Room for one more?
Gaiak asked, a sadistic smile stretching on his cruel face. The tension in the air was thicker than gunsmoke. On his left stood Gatling Man, his namesake loaded and ready to fire at the first provocation. On his right was Gaiak, who carried himself with the easy nonchalance and predatory menace of a spirit tiger about to pounce. The three cultivators observed one another, none of them making the first move. Yuan swiftly grabbed his Kalash Angel with his left hand and wielded his Saint Heckler with the right, each weapon pointed at a different foe.
Neither of them attacked.
Doing so would open them to retaliation from the other parties. They were at an impasse for now. Gatling Man broke the silence first. "You've got guts showing up alone, fleshcrafter trash. Why would Elder Polio need to send anyone else?" Gaiak lazily grabbed his tattered rags and tossed them to the ground, now wearing only a pair of shorts. "You tin cans are also weak." Yuan suppressed a shiver of disgust. Gaiak's ashen skin was a mess of stitches and sutures, his pallid limbs having been attached to his torso through surgery rather than naturally grown. For snake-like yellow eyes replaced the nipples on his thin chest, a bronze chain coiled around them. As for his stomach, it didn't hide anything. A bloody hole stretched from his shorts to his ribcage, with a set of coiling purple tentacles squirming where his intestines should have been. Gatling Man scoffed in disdain. "Big talk from trash who needs to steal the flesh of slaves for strength. It would have been wiser for you to skip town, stranger," Gaiak told Yuan as he stretched his legs. Though he seemed utterly unintimidated, Yuan could see the razor-sharp focus in his posture. The eyes of his chest constantly darted between him and Gatling Man. "I suppose you haven't come back to join us?" Yuan briefly considered lying in order to take down Gatling Man first, but something told him Gaiak would immediately pick up on it.
Besides, he knew himself.
Mingxia told him he had the charisma of a stone wall. Yuan pointed his heckler at Gaiak's chest.
"I'll pass."
"A shame, but I was hoping you'd say that." Gaiak's manic, yellow smirk oozed bloodthirst and malevolence. "I've never killed a gunsoul before, let alone two of them." "And you never will," Gatling Man replied, his minigun ready to fire. "I'll slaughter the both of you, and your deaths will free me from the gun's curse." The tension sharpened even further. Yuan gripped his weapons tighter, as did Gatling Man with his own. Gaiak adjusted his posture, crouching slightly and extending his fingers as if they were claws. Yuan's bullet core pounded like a heart in his skull. He had the feeling that Gaiak was primarily a close-range threat from the way he stretched his muscles, so keeping him at a distance should be his top priority. Gatling Man's minigun was powerful, but could only attack one of his foes at a time with their current positioning. His shoulder weapons did remain an unknown factor. Considering that Gaiak was his sect elder's apprentice and Yuan was a fellow gunsoul, whose powers he shared, he would likely consider the former the greater threat. Yuan had a pretty good idea of how the first strike would resolve and planned accordingly. 1. He counted in his head, all the duelists moving subtly.
2. THRE.
Gatling Man opened fire at Gaiak with a mechanical roar. Yuan, who had anticipated this development, attacked Gatling Man with both of his weapons. Meanwhile, Gaiak struck the ground with his fist at blinding speed. A line-shaped barrier arose in response to the impact, creating a shining wall against which the hail of bullets shattered and flattened. The Saint Heckler and Kalash Angel unleashed their volleys at Gatling Man. The former's bullets harmlessly bounced off his chi-empowered metal armor, as for the latter, they phased through his metallic body.
All of them.
Including the ones aiming for his head. The seemingly organic skull was just as artificial as the rest of the walking oven.
"I knew it."
Yuan raged while charging at Gatling Man to engage him in melee, where his heavy minigun would be an impediment.
"A decoy."
A gunsoul's life was tied to their bullet core, but as Ark proved, they didn't all need to be shot in the head to rise from the dead. Gatling Man's skull was a decoration, an enticing target meant to fool enemies into focusing on it and wasting precious time. In Yuan's case, this helped him confirm that his enemy likely had no biological components left to speak of. His bullet core could be located anywhere in his body too. Yuan focused on his foe's flow of chi in an attempt to locate its source, but Gatling Man's energies flowed through his metal armor as an impenetrable wall obscuring his occult sight. A case of content theft. This narrative is not rightfully on Amazon. If you spot it, report the violation. Since striking at the usual vital spots wouldn't do much, Yuan decided to focus on his enemy's joints. He closed the gap between them before Gatling Man could reposition his weapon quickly enough and jumped at him with his feet extended, a recoil kick ready to trigger. A familiar clicking sound echoed across the air, and Gatling Man's body moved out of the way. He didn't jump, twist, or step to the side, no. His entire body was propelled 5 meters to his right, like a doll pushed aside by an invisible force. It was unnerving to watch.
What the hell?
Yuan's eyes widened in surprise as he landed on an empty spot. He recognized the familiar clicking noise of the recoil fist, but Gatling Man used neither his hands nor feet. It's like the shockwave was evenly distributed across his entire body. He didn't have time to question it for long. While Gaiak rushed at them with bone swords surging from his wrists, Gatling Man's shoulders opened up to reveal rows of missile launchers. Realizing the danger, Yuan hastily did a recoil kick and propelled himself backward. He intentionally leapt off the wall and into the city with a swarm of small rockets flying after him. The rest of them bombed the encroaching Gaiak, though Yuan couldn't tell if any of them hit him. Yuan let himself fall down the wall and shot at the missiles with the Saint Heckler. His enhanced reflexes and accuracy let him hit them all, their blasts echoing in bursts of smoke and fire. Yuan quickly took a look at the world below. The spirit train had entered the city beneath him, with Revolver blowing a path forward through makeshift barricades and metallist cyborgs alike. Flesh Market looked like a mess, with fleshy abominations rampaging through the streets amidst growing screen-faced towers and drones. A few fires spread across the landscape and threatened to worsen into an inferno that would engulf the city. A rain of violent gunfire forced Yuan to focus. Gatling Man fell through his exploded missile smoke, his minigun pointing at him. What it lacked in accuracy, it more than made up for in sheer cadence and firepower. A few of his projectiles hit Yuan's armored breastplate with enough strength to leave an impact and inflict damage. Without the Sentided armor softening the impact and elemental infusion reinforcing his skin underneath, he would have been torn apart, and it hurt like hell even with it. Worse, Gaiak followed closely after Gatling Man, though he was vertically sliding down the wall rather than falling into the void. Gotta lead these two away from the spirit train. Yuan quickly looked around midfall and noticed the Bullet Church's base to his left. Its outer perimeters and fortifications had been breached by advancing metallist soldiers, but scrap gunmen still held the central building.
There.
Yuan first slammed into Flesh Market's wall with a recoil kick, redirecting his fall and propelling himself towards the Bullet Church. This helped him briefly escape Gatling Man's line of fire, calculate a good angle, and retaliate with the Saint Heckler. Gatling Man easily deflected most projectiles with his hand, but a few ricocheted off the wall and hit his left eye. The hit caused Gatling Man to briefly stop firing. He didn't dodge the direct attack, which meant his recoil technique must either have a downside or cost a lot of chi to activate. Yuan guessed his enemy was trying to pace himself since he would have to keep up some power to fight Gaiak with. This left him open to sneak and surprise attacks. Gatling Man should have also run out of bullets by now too, or at least started pacing himself. Miniguns couldn't sustain their rate of fire for long. Even if Gatling Man could replenish his stock with item materialization, he would have needed to stop to refill his reserves. Maybe that was the minigun's special gunsole ability? A bottomless magazine? Leaving Gatling Man behind, Yuan used repeated recoil kicks to propel himself towards the Bullet Church. He was halfway there when he sensed something moist coiling around his weapons. He looked at them just in time to see that 2 of Gaiak's intestine tentacles had lengthened across dozens of meters and grabbed his firearms. A third one of them had found a different target in Gatling Man's minigun. By the time Yuan realized the danger, his foe already tried to wrest his weapons away. Yuan first attempted to resist, but his firearms weren't designed to survive being pulled by 2 superhumanly strong cultivators in different directions. His Saint Heckler snapped in 2 like a twig. Fortunately, this allowed Yuan to free his right hand and punch the tentacle holding the Kalash Angel, but Gaiak immediately recalled it before his enemy's fist could make contact. Meanwhile, Gatling Man had made the same mistake as Yuan earlier before by pulling back his weapon and accidentally shattering it. He roared in frustration, let go of his destroyed minigun, and then took a page from Yuan's book by flying after Gaiak with a series of rapid-fire recoil kicks. Gaiak dodged his pursuer by leaping off the wall and then running across the air itself. Ark had warned Yuan that someone could use their body as a support for barriers, and the Flesh Mansion cultivator proved it. He created small ones from his hands and feet capable of repelling Gaiak himself. They were hardly any larger than small discs, but they gave him physical support on which to run. Yuan pondered how their bout was going as the 3 pursued each other in midair. It would have been easier for Gaiak to strike their ankles or more vital spots, but he instead went for more difficult targets. He avoided grabbing our bodies because he feared a recoil fist counterattack. Gaiak wisely focused on destroying his enemy's weapons, thus limiting their options and resources.
Cunning.
Worse, his method of flight was less taxing than Yuan's. The recoil fist consumed his personal chi like any other technique, while barriers drew upon ambient one. Gaiak had hardly spent any energy since the fight started. He's not an elder's apprentice for nothing. Gaiak seemed to be the most dangerous of Yuan's foes, quicker, more skilled, smarter, but Gatling Man was no slouch either. These two were nothing like the Radhag he fought in the Thunderlands or Toshiro. They were a cut above his opposition so far. Yuan would have been intimidated once, but today? Today, his body trembled with anticipation. At long last, he could put his new skills to the test against the best recruits their respective sects had to offer. They embodied the systems which had oppressed him, his fellow scraps, and the likes of Holster. And today, Yuan Guang would fight back.